Okay. That probably didn't do anything. You can hear me? Okay, here's what I did. I think what was going on was I did an OBS recording a while back and it was unusable because I had the microphone on the same track as the PC audio. So I moved it to a different track, but for some fucking reason, when I stream, it doesn't stream all the tracks. So I had to move it back to the track it was originally on. I don't know why it did that. I don't know why I can't stream like 4 tracks. I can only stream apparently 1 or 2. I don't get it. I should be able to just stream the thing. I don't know if there's a setting I need to change to make that happen, but yeah, first 5 to 10 minutes of this stream is ruined. So you can hear me now. That's good. That's good. Well, that's good. That's good. So I have some things planned for this video, for this stream. I have, just like with my 2,000 subscribers stream where I did, I reviewed some videos about fascism. In this one, I have a couple of, I guess we could call them culture war videos, plus one video about the German National Socialist movement, where the guy is trying to argue that the National Socialists of Germany were in fact socialists, which is interesting. Not an argument I hear very often, but one that I'm definitely receptive to, given how insistent I am on the sort of left-wing half of the synthesis that went into creating the broader National Socialism movement. I don't know personally very much about Hitler, although I know Hitler was very much not a fan of socialism. But you can say, you can not be a fan of socialism and still have a left-wing edge. And so it's a complicated question. And of course, the Strassers were definitely socialists. So, but we're going to get to that later. Before that, we have a couple of culture war videos to cover. But before that, I'm thinking I might want to start with an old Republican song from 100 years ago. I feel like singing a song of anger. Let me see. All right. I was born in the Dublin street where the loyal drums did beat, and the loving English feet they tramped all over us. And every single night that my father came home tight, he'd invite the neighbours outside with his chorus.
Come out, you black and tans, come out and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. Tell her how the IRA made you run like hell away from the green and lovely lanes of Kalishandra. Come tell me how you slew them poor Arabs 2 by 2. Robert Everett too, you hung and drew and quartered. How you hung the scaffold high, how you murdered Henry Joy, and our Crumpy boys from Wexford you did slaughter. Come out, you black and tans, come out and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. Tell her how the IRA made you run like hell away from the green and lovely lanes of Kalishandra. Come let me hear you tell how you slandered great Parnell. Robert Abbott, when you thought him well and truly persecuted. Where are those sneers and jeers that you bravely let us hear when our leaders of 16 were executed? Come out, you black and tans, come out and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. Tell her how the IRA made you run like hell away from the green and lovely lanes of Kalishandra. What do you mean the fuck is going on, Rakushi? What does it look like is going on? I'm singing a song of the Irish Republicans. And apparently I'm a fan of Robert Emmet because I brought him up twice. So, yeah, I just felt like singing. Maybe I should turn the microphone a little bit down in the mix because I saw I peaked really hard a couple of times there. Okay. So, before we hop into the videos, is there anything you guys want to say? You have any conversation you want to add? Cosmic Cynic is here. He's a pretty regular person on these streams. Some of these names I'm not too familiar with. Connor074, don't quite remember you. Carlos Torres, not really sure I remember you. I don't remember. I feel like Carlos, that sounds familiar. Sing Roland the Headless Gunner. I have no idea what that is. Never heard of that. Cosmic Cynic, I feel like you've been here. I mean, I know you were on the 2,000 subscribers special. Maybe it was just you're there the whole time and you left a whole bunch of comments. Because I definitely remember you. All right, so want to see the big reveal. Do any of you guys, do any of you remember this video? Were any of you guys around back in these days? Do you remember good old BuzzFeed questions? Cosmic Cynic knows. Yeah. He says it did not age well. Well, we're gonna see about that. Because the thing is, like, I still haven't gotten over my anti-SJW phase. I'm still very much an anti-SJW to my core. I'm proud of it. But the thing is that this genre of videos on YouTube was like always terrible. It was always horrible. It was just full of really
trash content with really bad arguments, a lot of like straw man fallacy, and just plain like not understanding nuance, not understanding lingo. Many people in this video don't like each other now. Well, what's interesting is that this video was made by the Amazing Atheist, and he reached out to people who he had issues with in the past, who he had beef with in the past, like Kraut and T is in this one, and Atheism is Unstoppable is in this one, and he had a lot of beef with the Amazing Atheist. And so some of these people didn't like each other even then. Anthony Fantano is in this video, and he's kind of a lot of these people have kind of sworn off this anti-SJW stuff. For good and bad reasons. Yeah, for good and bad reasons. I mean, I think a lot of people got carried away with it, and then they suddenly realized that was happening, and then they pulled back really hard and kind of acted like there was never a problem with SJWs in the first place. But there was, and this community, that it started out as a community of liberals who were mad at left-wing culture warriors who were trying to basically act like nannies and boss people around and tell them that they're being inappropriate, and basically just like spoil everyone's fun. Like they were just the cock blockers of the culture. And so these liberals and liberal atheists in particular on YouTube were like, why this sucks? Why would we like this? This is not good. This goes against the whole free thought and free expression mindset that we as liberals enjoy. And so that's still very much the point of view that I take on it. I never went the other direction. I never was like, oh no, I get it, the SJWs are right the whole time. No, they weren't. They were always stupid. They were always lame. There was a problem, but it was exaggerated. Well, it was exaggerated, and that's a huge part of the issue. And then it was merged with basically the same thing that SJWs are, but on the right. It was merged with right-wing political correctness. And so it's like, this isn't about free thought and expression. This isn't about liberal values anymore. It's just about left versus right. Like, because the thing is, people are always smarter when they're alone. And when you have a whole crowd of people, they get stupid. And that's what happened with the anti-SJWs. The more people came into the fold, the dumber the fold got. And when things get dumb, they get conservative. That's how it goes. I mean, there's a clear correlation between dumb and conservative. And the more you go along the dumb axis, the more you go along the conservative axis. And that's what happened, unfortunately. Cosmic Cynic says, I think I've moved slightly towards the SJW direction, but I still think a lot of it is stupid. Yeah, honestly, I don't think I have. I think I've refined a lot more in my ability to discern things, because I used to be a lot more taken by this community. I used to be more kind of friendly to this kind of content. Even the lazy stuff. I kind of enjoyed. But I got really tired of the stupidity after a while. And it was actually kind of around the time this video came out, because this was 2016. I think April 2016 was when I realized that this community was going down the drain. I remember the specific month. It was April. Because I remember that was the first time I heard someone use the phrase culture war. Like, unironically, some anti-SJW was talking about, we're in a culture war. And that's when I realized, oh, okay, this is getting stupid. Because you're right, Cosmic Cynic, it wasn't that big of a deal. Like, I always liked, I liked the anti-SJW stuff because it was like, lighten up, bros. Because these SJWs were all trying to be really serious and really, like, reverent. And, oh, we gotta not offend these people, and we gotta tiptoe around this, and we gotta let these people talk, and shut up, white people, because you're too privileged to have an opinion. And I was like, fuck you, you're lame. And so I liked the anti-SJWs because they were edgy, you know, they're like, hey, fuck it, we'll do whatever we want. But then it became like, we're in a battle. We're in a war for the soul of America. And it's like, okay, now you're taking it way too seriously. Taking it way too seriously. You're getting ridiculous with it. So, I want to watch this video. I haven't watched this video since 2016. And I'm just curious to see what it is. I might agree with some of it. I might disagree with some of it. It would be interesting just to see who's in it. I can talk about the people in it a little bit. So, let's start. First, let's start with the Amazing Atheist here. Because he's the one who made the video. He begins it off.
Why do you claim to
fedora.
speak for LGBT people, women, and ethnic minorities, but when LGBT people, women, and ethnic minorities disagree with you, you harass them?
That's a good point. See, we're already starting with a good point. Cosmic Cynic, you said this video didn't age well. Well, so far, I think it's aged pretty well. Because one of the things that they would do, the SJWs, is they would say that, like, they speak for minorities. And that, like, all minorities agree with them because they have this, like, shared oppression experience. But then a lot of minorities wouldn't agree with them. And when they disagreed with them, then, oh, the vitriol that suddenly came out of them. Like, we love giving minorities a voice. Give minorities a voice. These people who have been historically downtrodden. Yeah, give them a voice. Let them speak. Let them teach us what they have to know. Right? It was all about, like, shut up, white people. Shut up, men. Give the microphone to the minorities. Okay, but then when the minorities say something they don't like, then it was like, fuck you! Like, it's total hypocrisy. Like, they on one side of their mouths, they want to be, you know, give minorities a voice, but then when minorities actually use that platform to say what they want to say their opinions, and they don't line up with the narrative that they're pushing, ooh, bad news. Can't have that.
Realize that your war on language through political correctness has made you bedfellows with true rape culture. In other words, Islam, the world's...
I always hated this guy. The Amazing Atheist loved this guy. I never understood. This guy I always thought was, like... It must have just been the voice. I think the Amazing Atheist liked him just because he had a cool voice. Because I always thought his content was stupid. Undoomed. I think someone in the comments said, I didn't know Slender Man had a YouTube channel. Yeah. But he is making a point here. Yeah, he was the Hey Morons guy. Where he's picking on Ash Hardell for like a video that wasn't even that bad. And he was just laying into her like, you're a moron. You're a moron. And it's like, geez, calm down. Like, she isn't even saying anything, and you're already calling her a moron. Yeah, but he's making a point here. It's not a terrible point, which is that there's this kind of knee-jerk, I think, defense of Islam on the left. And it's probably a bigger deal in places like England, where there's a lot more Muslims. There's this knee-jerk defense of Islam because people so often are anti-Islamic due to racist reasons or xenophobic reasons. And so they're like halfway there. They get that part of it, but then they stop there and they forget the fact that actually, in some ways, it actually makes sense to be xenophobic against Islam because the culture of Islam, in some ways, is actually horribly barbaric and cruel, and we shouldn't be importing it over here. Like, I'm sorry, that's the truth. Because it is a right-wing, a far-right fundamentalist religion, way more so, I think, than Christianity at this point. There's way more extremism among Islamists than among Christian fundamentalists at the moment. And the culture is far more backwards. So, and there's complicated, you can ask complicated questions about that, like, how should that affect the way we handle immigration? I don't know what the answer to that is. They're obviously, when Muslims come to more, I guess what I would call more civilized countries with more liberal values, they tend to assimilate. They tend to adopt those values themselves, or their kids do. And so it's not like they're just going to be barbarians forever. But at the same time, when you have huge waves of these people from what I would term an uncivilized culture, a more conservative culture, coming over to a more liberal country, yeah, they're going to cause some problems. And so I understand where people would take issue with that. And I don't know what the answer is there. But the answer certainly isn't to do what a lot of these kind of social justice people do, which is basically say any criticism of Islam is racist. Because like Undoomed said, Islam is actually, there's like a way better argument that the culture of Islam is a rape culture than the culture of Christianity at this point in human history. Maybe not always, I'm not sure about that. But at this point in human history, I think that the bodily autonomy of women is a much bigger problem in Islamic cultures. But that's not a politically correct thing to say. So far, we've had The Amazing Atheist making a good point. Undoomed made a good point, which is surprising. Let's see if the good points keep coming.
Most misogynistic ideology.
Do you want women to be equal, or do you want women to be a protected class? You can't have both. If you expect society to treat women as equal with men, why don't women have to take responsibility for their own safety?
What are you?
Ooh. I don't get what this guy... Oh, darling. Carl, too, you made it. I don't know. Okay, Armored Skeptic. I love Armored Skeptic's current content. He does this awesome series. What did you miss, Carl, too? Oh, you missed, I sang Come Out You Black and Tans, and I had audio issues at the beginning. And I started watching this video, Questions White Men Have for SJWs. We're reviewing this. But anyway, no, Skeptic did not become a weird conspiracy guy. This is a misunderstanding. You gotta understand, Armored Skeptic's new content, okay, it definitely has an edge of, like, paranoid schizophrenia about it. And I do think Armored Skeptic has a paranoid side of his personality. Like, there is something a little bit off about him. I mean, he did join, like, a fundamentalist Jewish cult when he was younger. And then he got out of that and became Armored Skeptic. And then he made all these atheism videos, which were, like, not very good, but they were funny. That's the thing I liked about Armored Skeptic, is that, like, often he was bad at argumentation and he said a lot of wrong things, but he had a really funny personality and he had funny animations that he would do, and so that kind of kept me watching. But that wasn't his best content. His best content is the stuff he's currently making right now. His History is a Lie series was great. The videos he makes about, like, crop circles and aliens and stuff. I love the Bigfoot stuff. Okay, what you got to understand about Armored Skeptic is that, like, he kind of is doing what Shane Dawson was doing back in 2017 with his conspiracy theory series, where he's doing, like, campfire stories. So this stuff is not meant to be taken totally seriously. He knows that it's a little bit far-fetched, but this is the stuff that he obsesses over. This is the stuff that he's interested in, and so he's basically presenting these what-if scenarios that he's backing up with a whole bunch of evidence that he can pull from this place and that place, like creating some big complicated web of connections. And it's really fun. I worry about the guy's mental health, and I do think that he takes things really seriously a lot of the time in a way that makes me think that he maybe there's, like, something going on with his mind. He's not I don't want to say he's not all there, because he's definitely put together. He's a put together gentleman, but, like, some of the posts I've seen him make, he seems very dramatic. Like, and one time I remember, like, he was talking about Candace Owens or somebody he knew, and talking about, like, the betrayal he felt. And he was being so, like, over dramatic about it. And I feel like that's kind of his problem, is he's really kind of a very emotive person, and like thinks of himself as, like, a main character in a movie or something. It's weird. You gotta watch his new stuff, Cosmic Cynic. It's so entertaining. It's like some of the most entertaining stuff on YouTube. That's why he's a featured channel on my channel. He's, like, in my recommended channel section, because I love the new Armored Skeptic content. But let's go back and watch what he said here, because this was, like, the first dumb point in the video, or I don't even know if it was dumb, but I don't get it.
Do you want women to be equal, or do you want women to be a protected class? You can't.
Okay, do you want women to be equal, or do you want women to be a protected class? So I don't really know what he's referring to here.
Can't have both. If you expect society to treat women as equal with men, why don't women have to take responsibility for their own safety?
See, like, this is a bad point. This is not good. This is not good. How do we approach this? Carl 2 says he may be manic and conspiratorial, but he's also entertaining and funny. Yeah. He's a little bit manic and conspiratorial. But he has self-awareness about this conspiratorial side, at least. He knows, because he was the armored skeptic, you know? He was the guy who debunked stuff like that. And so he knows that he's being kind of crazy when he makes those videos, but they're for fun. Also, I totally ship him and Shoe on Head. I don't know anything about Shoe on Head's weird Nazi boyfriend husband that she has right now, but I loved his relationship with her back in the day. But yeah, this point, like, okay, he's talking, what is he talking about? Women, like, if we want women to be equal with men, they have to take responsibility for their own safety like men. Personally, I kind of feel like, is this just a coded reference to, like, sexual assault? Is that what this is? Is that the only thing he's talking about here? Because I can't think of any other, like, big cultural meme about women's safety than that issue. Then, like, but I don't get it. I don't get what his issue is with that. Like, women having to take responsibility for their own safety. Like, do SJWs think that women shouldn't take responsibility for their own safety? I don't remember them ever saying that. It seems just that SJWs feel like the world should be a safer place for women, which it should be. Like, why would you object to that? And why is it a double standard? This point is so baffling that it's taken me like 5 minutes to figure out what he's saying. Anyway, let's listen to Anthony Fantana. What does he have to say?
What are you afraid will happen when you leave your safe space?
How can you possibly...
What was that? What are you afraid will happen when you leave your safe space? The concept of a safe space among SJWs is basically like, if let's just say women, right? If women have, like, issues where they've had to deal with a lot of toxic men in their lives, having a space with just other women where they can just feel safe to be who they are is valuable. So that's the basic concept of a safe space. Now, it can be detrimental. Like, for instance, certain trans safe spaces, trans support groups, you can't say anything that even kind of slightly sounds negative about someone's transition, or about the concept of transitioning in general, or about elective surgery, stuff like that, because then that's going to be like violating the safe space. So there are problems that result from that. And certainly intellectual spaces shouldn't be safe spaces, like academic spaces shouldn't be safe spaces. But, like, the concept of a safe space in abstract isn't that bad. But, I mean, that's a question I don't know how to answer. What will happen when you leave your safe space? It's so vague. I don't really know. I don't know. What will happen? It's weird to see Fantano here. Well, yeah, because in 2016, Fantano was friends with all these people. And that's what got him busted by Fader, who called him alt-right. And then he got all mad about that. But he's not alt-right. And most of these people are not alt-right. But they will get slandered as alt-right. I think partly because alt-right kind of doesn't mean anything. It's just like a category that people gave to themselves on 4chan.
Justify the idea that it's somehow racist to disagree with Black Lives Matter, and yet it's not racist when a black person tweets something like, "Kill all white people."
There's AIU. Okay, what is... So he's got... AIU always used to do this in the backgrounds of his video, just put like totally irrelevant stuff. I don't know why he did that, but like we have this skinny person on a bed with a Marilyn Manson poster. Okay. But I mean, what did the Amazing Atheist say there? He said, like it's racist to disagree with Black Lives Matter, but it's not racist for a black person to say kill all white people. Well, the reason for that is because they don't believe black people can be racist. And they bafflingly use a line of argumentation that's like, reverse racism doesn't exist. Which is really funny because nobody actually uses the term reverse racism unless they're trying to make the argument that black people can't be racist. Most people just call it racism. It's not reverse racism. Reverse racism would be like the opposite of racism. But they have this idea that racism equals prejudice plus power, which it's just some bullshit they made up. Like somebody just made that up. that was never a thing until someone just decided to arbitrarily make it a thing. Yep, it's the kangaroo man who was at the OJ trial. Yeah, he was at the OJ Simpson trial next to Richard Dreyfuss. This guy right here. There's a picture of him. But yeah, I guess I agree with the Amazing Atheist's sentiment here that black people can be racist. It's so frustrating to me that there are people who act like the SJW thing was never a problem. And it's like, how do you explain all of this stuff? All of these arguments that they're talking about? And then the SJWs will respond to it like, we don't say that. Who has ever said that? Are you fucking out of your minds? People have totally said that stuff. Like, watch any Sargon of Akkad video from back in the day, or just any video by these guys, and you'll see these arguments. I mean, people have made these arguments in the past. These are not straw men. Now, these people did make straw man arguments, but so far, the ones I'm seeing in this video are not straw men, because I remember people saying this stuff back in the day. Like, in various articles and public speaking events and all kinds of stuff, SJWs would put forward these opinions. Cosmic Cynic says, what? What? in the butt. I don't know what you mean by what. Let's see what AIU has to say.
Question. Are you aware that the present is not the past? I'm not kidding. Are you familiar with the concept of linear time? Because you seem incredibly comfortable traveling back through time to talk about how bad things were for women, or black people, or whoever. And then by using some form of SJW magic, you then claim or imply that those problems in the past exist today. Are you aware that this trick that you're doing is not working? Why do you think that would work?
Yeah, this is a terrible argument. Devon, you totally bricked that one. Obviously, like, the legacy of systemic oppression doesn't go away altogether in an instant. There are going to be vestiges of that hanging around in the culture. So, like, if we're talking about slavery, it's not that, oh, slavery's over, and so there's no point in bringing it up anymore. It's that slavery set black people back however many years and gave them these disadvantages that don't just go away once you outlaw slavery. So yeah, that was a terrible argument. But now we have Sargon.
Do you really think you can spend your entire life in a state of perpetual emotional immaturity? Do you actually imagine that you will be able to stretch out your adolescence for your entire existence?
See, this is just insulting. This isn't even really a question. It's just like, why are you such a bitch? Huh? Now we have Cult of Dusty, which is really funny because Cult of Dusty is now just in SJW. Like, he just went totally to the other side. He just flipped. He just decided to switch teams. He didn't even learn anything, really. He's just like equally as bad as he used to be, but just in a different direction. Carl too says, off topic, you should sing Rising of the Moon in Kinky Boots. What the hell? Kinky Boots? I don't know what that... Like some S&M shit. Man from the Daily Mail too. How did Man from the Daily Mail go? I can't remember. Because that was one... Like, you follow me on Reddit, you probably know I did that post about the battering ram. That was one they did on that album, Irish Rebel Songs. But I can't remember how it goes. Rising of the Moon is a good song, though. And come tell me, Sean O'Farrell, tell me why you hurry so. What are the rest of the lyrics in that? Haven't heard of Dusty in like 4 or 5 years. Yeah, he's now an SJW. Although I guess he was 4 or 5 years ago too. He kind of abandoned this early. He was one of the early abandoners of the anti-SJW thing, and he was actually kind of right for doing it at the time. Of the Moon lyrics. Yeah, he was right at the time, because in 2016 he attacked the drunken well, no, he didn't even really attack the drunken peasants. He mentioned the Amazing Atheist in a video he made just about the general anti-SJW community. And the mistake he made was calling them alt-right. He said they were making alt-right talking points, which was a very inarticulate way of trying to express what he was trying to say, which was basically that he's a liberal. He's always been a liberal ever since he converted to atheism. And he saw the anti-SJW community, which used to be a community of liberals, now becoming a community of conservatives. And so he wanted to attack that. But he didn't know what alt-right meant, or he just wasn't very careful with its terminology, and so he basically attacked everyone for being alt-right, including the Amazing Atheist. And then Drunken Peasants responded to that with episode 285.5, because it was between days of doing the show. They were like, this video is so stupid, we have to comment on it right now. We can't even wait for the next episode. But the problem was, it wasn't a stupid video. It was actually a good video. Not a good video. It was a bad video. But it was a good point that Dusty was trying to make. And they just weren't listening at all. And so that started the rift between TJ and Dusty. Where honestly, like, I think both of them are at fault. I think Dusty is at fault for not having any sense of forgiveness, and TJ is at fault for just being a petty bitch. But TJ was way more at fault for that than Dusty ever was. And I think TJ has finally eventually come around on it. But I remember back in the day, I was arguing with people on the DP subreddit saying, dude, you guys are totally full of shit about Dusty. Dusty was right about this. And nobody wanted to listen to me back then. But now it's funny because now a lot of those people are probably on Dusty's side and think that Dusty didn't do anything wrong ever. And I'm looking at it like, well, no, don't let Dusty off the hook either, because he's not perfect either. Cosmic Cynic says, I remember him getting in Twitter fights back then. Yeah, I mean, he's always been a keyboard warrior, Dusty. Hushmabuchel? That's what I was wanting to figure out, because I know the lyrics of Rising of the Moon, at least his first verse, but when Luke Kelly sings Hushmabuchel, I'm like, what is he saying? I've never understood that. Apparently he's saying something in Irish, so that makes sense why I didn't pick that up. But it goes and come tell me, Sean O'Farrell, tell me why you hurry so. Hush, my buchel, hush and listen, and his cheeks were all aglow. I bear orders from the captain, get you ready quick and soon. For the pikes must be together at the rising of the moon. At the rising of the moon, at the rising of the moon. For the pikes must be together at the rising of the moon. I'm a little bit off key on that, on the high notes. Maybe if I were singing it on guitar, I'd be able to get it. Let me try. And come tell me, Sean O'Farrell, tell me why you hurry so. Hush, my buchel, hush and listen, and his cheeks were all aglow. I bear orders from the captain, get you ready quick and soon. For the pikes must be together at the rising of the moon. At the rising of the moon, at the rising of the moon. For the pikes must be together at the rising of the moon. And come tell me, Sean O'Farrell, where the gathering is to be. At the old spot by the river, quite well known to you and me. One more word for signal token, whistle out the marching tune. With your pike upon your shoulder at the rising of the moon. At the rising of the moon, at the rising of the moon. With your pike upon your shoulder at the rising of the moon. Out from many a mud-walled cabin, eyes were watching through the night. Many a manly heart was beating for the blessed morning light. Murmurs rang along the valleys to the banshee's lonely croon. And 1,000 pikes were flashing by the rising of the moon. By the rising of the moon, by the rising of the moon. And 1,000 pikes were flashing by the rising of the moon. All along that singing river, that black mass of men was seen. High above their shining weapons flew their own beloved green. Death
To every foe and traitor, whistle out the marching tune. And hurrah, me boys, for freedom! 'Tis the rising of the moon. 'Tis the rising of the moon. 'Tis the rising of the moon. And hurrah, me boys, for freedom! 'Tis the rising of the moon.
There you go, Carl. I sing it for you.
That's a good one.
It's a old classic Republican tune. He had some good points, but at the same time he was being a giant a-hole about it. Yeah, he was. Thank you, Carl.
There are 13% more women in college right now than men. So if the whole goal of feminism is equality, shouldn't we have some men-only scholarships in order to equal everything out?
That's actually kind of a good point. These people keep making good points. I mean, it's not a really serious point, but like it is kind of funny that women outnumber men in higher education, even though there's like female-only scholarships, which would imply that we need women to catch up to men, but it seems like they've already surpassed men. So what's that about? But anyway, he used the word feminism there. And that's another problem with these guys back in the day, is they kept using the word feminism. And I was part of that problem, because I would do the same thing, because it was just easy. It was an easy, like, you know, it was an easy word to use just to get across the idea. But the problem was that feminism means so much more than just this politically correct BS. Feminism, it's essentially about equal rights for women. And then all the other stuff is kind of tacked on to that. So when you are like anti-feminist, what you're saying is basically you want a Sharia law society where like women are veiled and kept away from men. That's basically what you're saying when you say you're an anti-feminist. And people didn't understand that back then, or they just ignored that, and that's not a thing you want to ignore. And I kind of ignored that, and that was a huge mistake in the verbiage, I think. Rikushi says, reaction for Leintint a Tilika. That sounds like some Estonian stuff. Oh, it's a Finnish version for Whiskey in the Jar. I can sing Whiskey in the Jar. I actually know most of the lyrics to that one.
As I was going over the Cork and Kerry mountain.
It's A minor.
As I was going over the Cork and Kerry mountains, I met with Captain Farrell and his money he was
You know what the problem is? I've got these earbuds in, and they're making it hard for me to hear my chords. So I should charge them anyway, because I'm going to be here a while, it looks like.
As I was going over the Cork and Kerry mountains, I met with Captain Farrell and his money he was counting. I first produced my pistol and then I produced my rapier. Sing, stand and deliver, or the devil he might.
The changes I'm forgetting on that one.
The devil and deliver, or the devil he might take you.
Maybe I can't do Whiskey in the Jar. I don't know. I thought I could.
I took all of his money and it made a pretty penny. I put it in my pocket and I brought it home to Jenny. She sighed and she swore that she never would deceive me. But the devil take the women, for they never can be. Never can be easy mushering, dum-dum-doo, dum-dum-da. Whack full the daddy-o, whack full the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. I went unto my chamber, all for to take a slumber. I dreamt of golden jewels, and be sure it was no wonder that Jenny drew my charges, and she filled them up with water, and sent for Captain Farrell to be ready for the slaughter. Mushering, dum-dum-doo, dum-dum-da. Whack full the daddy-o, whack full the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. If anyone can aid me, 'tis my brother in the army.
This is where I get lost. That's not even the next verse. I think there's another one that comes before that.
There's some take delight in the carriages a-rolling, and others take delight in the bowling. But I take delight in the juice of the barley, and courting pretty fair maids in the morning, bright and early, morning bright and early, mushering, da-dum-doo, da-dum-da. Whack full the daddy-o, whack full the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm getting all mixed up on the chord changes on that one. Usually it's pretty self-explanatory. But I'm a little bit rusty, I guess, on whiskey in the jar. Anyway, let me pull out my earbuds again. Quibble is in Ireland? I didn't know that. I've seen you around here. I didn't know you were... Are you actually Irish? It's pretty interesting. Let me just make sure. Dang it. Yeah, I figured that I would mess up my settings by putting my earbuds away. Okay. That's connected. There we go. It's connected. Okay. It just took a minute for it to connect to OBS. Because the sound has to go through my earbuds so I can hear it, but then it also has to take what's going into my earbuds and stream it onto YouTube. So I had to make sure that that was put together. Chris Ray.
Feminism and egalitarianism are both...
Feminism and egalitarianism are both... Is this guy still dating Lacey Green, or did they break up? I can't remember. But you know what about Chris Ray Gun is that he's very short. He's a short man.
For equal rights, then why does one start with a gendered prefix while the other one is entirely gender neutral?
What?
Okay, that's pretty stupid. That's pretty self-explanatorily stupid. I don't think I need to explain that one. More Undoomed, another Undoomed question. Let's hear it.
What do you hope to gain by bringing back racial segregation?
Ah! Yeah, this is more what I was expecting from Undoomed. It's such a loaded question, because obviously the SJWs are going to say, we're not doing that. And that's probably, I've seen, there are several response videos to this one out there. And that's probably what they're going to say, like, we're not doing that. Like, you got to provide some details if you're going to ask a stupid loaded question like that. Like, I'm sure he's talking about something that actually exists, but we don't know what you're talking about. So it's not a good question.
When my granduncle was dropping bombs on London.
When my granduncle was dropping bombs on London. I love his voice. He has the best voice ever.
Did your grandparents get out of their bunkers in the morning to protest with signs that read, "Not all Nazis"?
Why do you think...
What? Cosmic Cynic says Chris Reagan and Lacey were a cute couple. I don't know. I never shipped them, but I could see why they were together, I guess. But like, what did Kraut just say there? Can we listen to that again? That was baffling from Kraut, because I usually expect Kraut to be a little bit smarter. But what was that?
When my granduncle was dropping bombs on London, did your grandparents get out of their bunkers in the morning to protest with signs that read, "Not all Nazis"?
Like, what is he talking about? Is this like an Islam thing? Because I know that Kraut hated Islam. And he would complain about Islamic terrorism in Europe. Was this a thing where he was... He's like saying, well, did they say stuff like "not all Muslims" in reaction to terrorist attacks? But it's a good point though, because actually not all Muslims, right? Actually not all Muslims. Cosmic Cynic says his point is that leftists say not all Muslims. Yeah. So if that's his point, then this is a bad point, because yes, all Nazis. Everyone who put on the armband and fought in the German army, as long as they were doing it because they actually believed in the cause and not because they were conscripted. Yes, all Nazis. You know what I mean? Like, you can't compare Nazis with Muslims in this case. It doesn't work. Islam is a broad religion. There are liberal Muslims, there are conservative Muslims, there are conservative Muslims who are against violent terrorism. There are conservative Muslims who are for violent terrorism. It's a little bit more complicated than all Muslims are bad. And Kraut knows this, which is why, like, he's not dumb enough to actually think all Muslims are bad. So it sounds like he's just offended that people would come to the defense of Islam after an attack, which is really dumb. Because that's like some Pat Condell getting mad at the Ground Zero Mosque thing. Like, that's really stupid. A better analogy would be not all Germans. Yeah, that would be a much better analogy. Carl 2 says Wahhabi, Sufi, Shia, Sunni, all different outlooks. Yeah, and even within them, like, there are liberal Sunnis, and then there are Wahhabists who are Sunnis. You know?
Why do you think every cis white male is born racist? Racism is a learned behavior.
How can...
Okay. Repsion, he's actually quitting YouTube for the third time. This time will be for real, guys. He's trying to sell his YouTube channel. He's trying to sell his YouTube channel. I want to see if I can pull that one up. Maybe I can take a look at that video at some point. If we have time in this stream, probably not, because we're really milking this video. Wow, and he's still making all these videos. Oh, he was diagnosed with autism at age 32? Why does that not surprise me? Why does that not surprise me at all? I always liked Repsion. I actually remember him from back before he was an atheist, I think. When he was still a deist. He's an interesting guy. I'll say that. Like, if you look into the Repsion files, you'll see a lot of interesting material. He's just an interesting person with an interesting story. Hold on, what? I can't find the video where he said he was selling his channel. Did he change his mind? Whoa! I can't find it. Oh, no, here it is. I'm quitting YouTube sometime in 2024. Never mind. I'll save this to the playlist. Okay. So let's... Hold on. Let's hear what he had to say again. Cosmic Cynic watched plenty of Repsion videos back in the atheist days. Yeah. I always kind of liked him.
Why do you think every cis white male is born racist? Racism is a learned behavior.
Yeah, this was the Milo Stewart thing. All white people are racist. All men are misogynistic. All cisgender people are transphobic. Which is obviously a really incendiary thing to say. I actually kind of agree with it, though, funnily enough. Even though I'm not in SJW, I actually kind of agree with that statement, because I think everyone's a little bit racist. I actually think that she wasn't being inclusive enough when she just picked on the white people. It's everyone. Everyone's a little bit racist sometimes, even though we don't go committing hate crimes. Ethnic jokes might be uncouth, but we laugh because they're based on truth. Don't take them as personal attacks. Everyone enjoys them, so relax. Are you guys fans of Avenue Q? I love that show. Great play.
How can you possibly say that the phrase "all lives matter" is somehow racist? It sounds like...
All right, this is the first bad point he's made. The point is that it's all lives matter is meant to discredit Black Lives Matter. And so in saying all lives matter, you're saying that you're against Black Lives Matter. That's the idea. Obviously, it's not racist to say all lives matter, and it's not racist to say Black Lives Matter either. But people act like it's racist to say Black Lives Matter. Why, I don't know. And that's the problem. So it's not even really racist. I think the criticism isn't necessarily it's racist to say that all lives matter. The criticism is that it's dumb to use that against the statement Black Lives Matter. But I think SJWs tend to have a problem with sometimes they'll recognize that something is wrong and they'll have a good point, but they'll use the wrong criticism, so they'll call it racist, when really I think what they're trying to say is that it's used by people who are trying to kind of discredit this movement, which may or may not be for racist reasons. The actual truth is a lot more complicated than just it's racist.
Like something the Dalai Lama would say.
Would you rather be right or popular? It seems like your primary objective is to score social points and get public validation. You speak publicly in the same way that people write their dating profiles. Stop trying to demonstrate how awesome you are and get real.
So if a drunk man sleeps...
Okay. Okay.
With a drunk woman, the woman is incapable of giving consent, but the man is?
You saw Avenue Q on Broadway? Wow, that must have been great. Yeah, that's a great show. So yeah, if a drunk woman has sex, she can't consent, but if a drunk man does, he can't. That's yeah. Yeah, I mean, is he wrong? Is he wrong that that's a huge hypocrisy? You guys are laughing at atheism is unstoppable. He was a freaking weirdo. Now he's working for Gavin McInnes, even though he's a liberal. Gavin's still letting him make videos on his censored TV website, which kind of shows that Gavin has a ever so small shred of basedness, I guess. Even though AIU isn't particularly good YouTuber, the fact that he's willing to work with him, even though he's a liberal. Claudia Burdella says, "Hey yo, it's very nice to see you, Claudia. It is usually assumed that the man is the rapist." Yeah, in the case where, well, I just see, like, I don't get what is it about being drunk that means you can't say yes to sex? I don't get that, because I've been drunk many, many times. And I have never once felt like my ability to, like, make a proper choice in a sexual situation was compromised. Never once. There's a difference between being drunk and being blackout drunk. Being so sloshed that you don't know where you are. Which I've never actually really been before, and I don't want to ever be. But I've been good and well and truly drunk, and I've never felt that my consent was somehow, like, compromised. I don't get that line of argumentation, and I find it upsetting. Because it sort of implies that you can't enjoy getting drunk and fucking. Which, I mean, that sounds like some real, like, that sounds like some Christian shit, you know? Like, I don't want that in my morality. Yeah, it depends on how drunk you are. Some people get extremely drunk, and then I can understand in that situation, like, yeah, lay off. But, like, I don't know, maybe I just handle my liquor better than other people, because that's what I've been told. I've been told that I handle my liquor very well. But, yeah, I've never felt that my ability to consent was compromised. So it's just a weird situation for me to even, like, before I'd ever been drunk, I always thought that I never quite agreed with this idea. And I only disagree with it more after having had many, 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 many drunk experiences. And then some people are angry drunks. Yeah, what's up with that? Why are some people angry when drunk? I can't help but have just the biggest goofy smile on my face when I'm drunk. I love, like, I have an outpouring of love and happiness when I'm drunk. I don't know why other people get angry. That's weird. I guess everyone handles it differently, but, like, you shouldn't discriminate against the people who can handle their liquor, is what I'm saying. Acting like everyone turns into a fucking baby when they're drunk is very infantilizing and kind of insulting, I think. Let's see what Sargon has to say.
Is it really easier to spend your life attempting to pacify the world and subdue all around you, instead of accepting that you are the person who has to change?
This just feels like a criticism that you can lob at anyone who has this kind of mentality. It's not really a good question to ask SJWs.
I'm singing along with rap music. Is it okay if I say the word nigga?
No. Well, I think it is. Let me sing a rap song. You want to hear me rap? I've never rapped on camera before. I'm not a great rapper. Claudia Burdella says, you were talking about this a bit on Reddit the other day, the alcohol things, not necessarily to do with rape or anything, though. Yeah, recently I was talking about how alcohol is great, like, it healed me a lot, socially speaking. I don't have social anxiety the way I used to, and that's a combination of developing a friendship with a with a guy I know in my town who he used to work where I work. I developed a really good friendship with him. He's been in some of my stuff. And alcohol being used to facilitate that in large part. I've healed greatly. It was a very medicinal thing for me. Yeah, Patti Smith used the N-word, and she wasn't even black, and she wasn't even a rapper. She wasn't even rapping. She wasn't even covering a song by a black person. She said in that song, she said the words Jimi Hendrix was a nigger. That's a pretty bold thing to say if you're a white person in a song, but she didn't mean it because Jimi Hendrix was black. She meant it because Jimi Hendrix was a rock star, and being a rock and roller to Patti Smith was this idea that you're an outcast. Yeah, oh God, it is such a crime. It is such a crime that they removed Rock and Roll Nigger from Spotify. Those a-holes. And then people seriously have the audacity to tell me that SJWs aren't a problem. And it's not because of any legal reasons or anything. It's literally just because political correctness. I looked it up. I hate that. I hate that so much. Let's bust some rap lines. Okay. I gotta get in the zone. Cutie the bomb met her at a beauty salon with a baby Louis Vuitton underarm. She said, I can tell you rock, I can tell you by your charm. Far as girls, you got a flock. I can tell by your charm and your arm, but I'm looking for the one. Have you seen her? My psychic told me she'd have an ass like Serena, Trina, Jennifer Lopez, 4 kids, and I gotta take all they badass to showbiz. Okay, get your kids, but then they got their friends. I pull up in the Benz, they all got up in, we all went to den, and then I had to pay. If you fucking with this girl, then you better be paid. You know why? Takes too much to touch her. From what I heard, she got a baby by Busta. My best friend says she used to fuck with Usher. I don't care what none of y'all say, I still love her. Now I ain't saying she a gold digger, but she ain't messing with no broke niggas. Now I ain't saying she a gold digger, but she ain't messing with no broke niggas. Get down, girl, go ahead, get down. Get down, girl, go ahead, get down. There you go. See, I'm not a great rapper, but I do like that song quite a lot. That's like one of the best written rap songs ever. Because if you pay attention to the structure, it's structured like a joke, and the whole thing, it's like a dialectic. There's like a dialectic going on between these different sides that he's talking about, like criticizing women for being gold digging whores, and then also being able to see their side of the perspective. And like he's kind of looking at the issue from multiple angles, which I find interesting. But then at the end, he delivers the punchline, and it ties the whole thing together, and it's so funny, and it works because it's basically I can't even explain why it's funny. I just have to deliver it. It's now I ain't saying you a gold digger, you got needs. You don't want to do the smoke, buddy, can't buy weed. You go out to paint, you can't. You go out to eat, he can't pay, y'all can't leave. It's dishes in the back, you gotta roll up your sleeves. But while y'all washing, watch him. He gonna make it to a Benz out of that Datsun. He got that ambition, baby. Just look in his eyes. This week he mops the floors, next week it's the fries. So, stick by his side. I know this dude's ballin', and yeah, that's nice, but make him keep calling and trying, and you stay right, girl. And when he get on, he leave your ass for a white girl. Isn't that the best way to end that song? That is like so clever and funny. And the irony, it's just, oh, it's so perfect. Yeah, it's the MGTOW anthem. But then it's also female MGTOW. It's like WGTOW at the end. That's why it's so great. Yeah, they removed Rock and Roll Nigger from Spotify. It's terrible. It's a crime against humanity, crime against art. That was such a good song too, and the Manson version is good, but it's not as good as the Patti Smith. The Patti Smith version rocks.
Do you reconcile your opinion that gender doesn't matter or even exist with your need to invent new genders each?
I've always felt this. This is so weird that the gender crowd is like, gender is a social construct. Gender, why would we need gender? Gender doesn't exist. And then it's like, I am agender, twice removed, more masc presenting than femme, to the 8th power, 2 spirit. It's like they come up with all these crazy complicated genders, and it's like, I thought gender didn't exist. I'm more in the camp of thinking like gender doesn't exist, and so we should just ignore it. Like, you don't have a gender. Nobody has a gender. It's a made-up idea. Stop with this like non-binary thing. It doesn't make sense. Manson's is incomparable. I blame... What do you blame? G/ACC? What? You're talking some reference to something that I don't know.
Day.
In your version of equality, will white men ever have a voice in society, or will white men always be too privileged to participate in discussion?
I guess this is an interesting question. Like, he's talking long term. Like, if you get everything you want at that point, are white people still gonna be living with that original sin? Because that's kind of, I can see that happening. If everyone became SJWs and went along with that program, I can see white people becoming like almost to the level of being like a second-class citizen. I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go totally in that direction, but I can see kind of like it would become hard to be white at a certain point. And that's kind of the issue with these social justice warriors, is they're like, white people, shut up. And it's like, but all you're doing is flipping it around. Like, I get that you want minorities to have a voice, supposedly, but then when they disagree with you, you don't. But I get that you want minorities to have a voice, but then the problem is that, like, if we're thinking long term, like, what good does it do to just take the same dynamic and flip it around? So now we're attacking this person. How about attack nobody? How about just everyone be cool? Cosmic Cynic says, when I was an anti-SJW, I thought the xenogender people were very common, but then I realized most of the left does not advocate for that. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that, because the xenogender thing is really weird to me. And I've always thought it was weird, and I still think it's weird. And, yeah. Carl 2 says, heading out for now. Got to get back to my office to finish my shift up. We'll be back. Okay. Well, goodbye, Carl. You were here for quite a while. Thank you for showing up. Claudia says you should look up Pill Eater and his ideas. No idea who that is.
What makes you think that the power of censorship that you are so desperately trying to establish now will at no point be used against you?
Why is it that if...
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, if you're not in favor of free speech, you have to think about that. But of course they don't care, and that's the problem, is the people who don't like free speech don't care about the idea that it could be turned around on them. Because it's like, well, yeah, we're at war. So you do it to me, I do it to you. Like, the idea of, like, they're not offended by their free speech being taken away, really. They're just offended about the ideas that they don't like being popular. But then they're hypocrites about it, because, like, and I'm thinking about people on the right. I'm thinking about people like, I think Fuentes is one of these people who's like, yeah, my free speech is being taken away, and that's such a big problem. But he doesn't care about free speech. He's admitted that many times. He doesn't care about free speech, but he pretends to, hypocritically, because it's all kind of realist for people like that. Like, Nick Fuentes is a political realist, and what that means is that he believes that basically might makes right, and that power is the only real thing in politics. And so he doesn't care how hypocritical he has to be. He doesn't care if he has to lie. If it gets him what he wants, he'll do it. And he's open about that fact. He'll admit to that. And so with people who are in favor of censorship, it's a totally different game. They don't actually believe in anything other than their agenda. They don't believe in fairness. They don't believe in the people having the right to disagree.
If a woman dresses sexy or even topless in public, you support it. But if a female video game character is dressed sexy, then you want her clothed more modestly.
What?
That's such a good point. That's a really good point. But I think there's a danger when arguing this point to maybe conflate different types of feminism, because there's sex positive and sex negative feminism, and they don't always get along. So I think it's possible that what we have here is not necessarily hypocrisy. What we have here is people not agreeing. But I'm not sure, because I feel like there is hypocrisy in there too. I feel like there are some people who are hypocritical about it. What's your take on the paradox of tolerance? I made a video about this a long time ago. It was I think it was the first episode of Rab Roundup I did. And basically I disagree with Popper that the answer is that tolerance is the one exception, or intolerance is the one exception. I don't think it should be an exception. I don't think there should be any exceptions to tolerance. And I've only become more firm about this as I've aged. It only becomes more and more apparent that that's necessary. Claudia Burdella says, make both topless. There's my solution. Yeah, I mean, in both cases, we're dealing with people expressing their sexuality, which is not a problem. So, it doesn't matter if men are doing it to objectify women. It doesn't matter if women are doing it to objectify themselves. It doesn't matter.
What is your favorite song to sing really loud when you're confronted with a different point of view? Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream.
Why?
Okay. There's Fantano. He had to put a music question in there.
Are you afraid of dissenting opinions? Your continued attempts to silence all opposition, either by smearing them publicly...
We're getting a lot of, like, censorship and dissent questions right now. And I don't think that these are criticisms you can lob exclusively at SJWs. I think these apply to people on several different axes. But I think they apply to the right quite a lot, too.
Or labeling their content as hate speech and having it removed only serves to insulate your bubble even more and maintain your echo chamber. It also prevents you from taking on new information and hearing different points of view that are sometimes superior to yours, which tends
Yeah, I agree with this.
to happen whenever I talk.
What is reverse racism? Like, what the actual
We were
fuck
just
is it?
talking about this.
It's just racism, right? I mean,
Yeah.
am I going crazy here? Am I taking crazy pills?
Do any of you people actually remember all the pronouns? You know the list, right? The one with
Nobody remembers all the
76
pronouns.
fucking genders.
Why do you feel entitled to control what artists and entertainers are allowed to express? Why do you think your sensibilities should be placed above the sensibilities of actual creators?
Have you ever considered that using the terms racism and sexism as haphazardly as you do to describe everything under the sun that makes you feel uncomfortable devalues the word to the point that it actually hurts the people who actually suffer from real sexism and real racism? Have you...
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I kind of like devaluing it a little bit. Like, you know, the Avenue Q thing of saying everyone's a little bit racist. I think we can say that some things are just mildly racist, you know, mildly sexist. So I kind of go the other way on this. I kind of think that we should devalue it a little bit, because then we kind of realize how mundane it really is, and then maybe we can work with it a little bit better. When we convince ourselves that we can't be racist or we can't be sexist, I think we're kind of making it even harder to really engage with those issues in a healthy way.
You ever fucking thought of that? Those are my questions, TJ. I hope you liked them. Hope I delivered on your fucking video.
Have you guys tried drinking this shit? It's great.
All right, is that it? Oh, okay. So this is like someone double uploaded this. Like someone stitched the video onto the back of itself. So that was that one. And honestly, it actually was a video. Like, for the most part, I think most of these questions were pretty on point. They were pretty good criticisms. They were pretty based. Yeah, some of them weren't good. Some of them were stupid. Some of them were just insults. But overall, like, I don't know what people are talking about. Let's read, like, this was a dark time. I come back to this video for proof that I've improved as a person. See, this person is wrong. This person says, I find it hilarious how most of these could just be answered with that doesn't happen. There's a straw man argument, and that's it. This is the gaslighting I'm talking. I feel like these people either have shit memories or they just want to gaslight me into thinking that nobody makes these arguments, because I swear people make these kinds of arguments. People say these kinds of things. And when you just claim that it doesn't happen, there's so many people. My brother is one of these people. He's like, that doesn't happen. He's like, he's totally bought into the like, anti-SJW is just a big hysteria. It's not. It really, like, these people are real, guys. Like, we didn't just make this up. Like, just because you don't do it doesn't mean other people don't. You got it? Thought he was going to say something completely different when he started with 13%. That's pretty funny. Yeah, apparently TJ deleted this, which is weird because he has way worse videos on his channel that he hasn't deleted, I think. I don't know. I haven't gone back and looked in it, but like this video is actually not bad. Claudia says, I got a video that would be of interest to this stream. I'll send it to you. Oh, okay. Are you going to send it to me on Discord? If Reddit was a person, well, it's actually multiple people. Holy crap, I used to think that this was legitimately smart when I was in my early years in college. Yeah, I mean, people are just trashing this. They're like, this is terrible. But like, they're not actually providing any arguments against it. They're just trashing it. But when you actually listen to what they're saying instead of just cringing at your own past, because I feel like a lot of these people are just cringing at the fact that they used to be anti-SJWs and they used to like all these people, even though they made, to be honest, a lot of them made bad content. But when you actually look at what they're saying and you remember the kinds of things that SJWs used to say back then, if you haven't lost your memory of that, like some of these people clearly have, then yeah, it's not a terrible video. Maybe it's because he doesn't want to feature people like AIU and Sargon, but he would, though. I don't think The Amazing Atheist is the kind of person to regret like platforming somebody. Maybe he is. He doesn't strike me as that kind of person. I think the closest he gets to that is he regrets starting this community, and that might have led to the election of Trump in some small way. He played a role in that election, probably. But yeah, I feel like, I mean, I wouldn't mind platforming AIU or Sargon. In fact, I want to talk to both of those people at some point on my channel. Speaking of Sargon, we have a Sargon video coming up next. But I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Nah, ContraPoints got Trump elected. This complete bullshit. Not even high, I just find this funny. ContraPoints got Trump elected? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? ContraPoints. Nerd conventions as social control and excuse for queers. Pill eater. Okay, this sounds interesting. You know I'm a furry degenerate, don't you? See, I'm starting. Here's something interesting. I'm starting to wonder if I actually am a furry, 'cause I don't think I am. But it's becoming a lot harder to justify that opinion the older I get. 'Cause I am fascinated by furries. And you know that's kind of a thing that people in the closet do, is they're like, oh, I'm not one of them, I'm just interested in them. It's like, But this is a video by Pill Eater. I'll add this to the playlist. Okay. So we'll take a look at that soon. But it has furries in the thumbnail, which does intrigue me as a maybe closet furry. I really hope I'm not a furry. I don't want to be a furry. But I might be. I might be. Okay. So, we're moving on to Sargon.
I always thought of myself as being left-wing.
I always thought of myself as being left-wing. This video might be a little bit quieter, so I'll turn up the PC audio a bit. And then we'll do this. So what are you guys' thoughts on Sargon? You gotta get on the news somehow. Yeah, fascination with furries is I find them extremely cringy. I find them extremely embarrassing in almost a kind of disturbing way. And yet, I feel so close to them, like I feel like I could almost be one. And so it's that contrast there, I think, that I find intriguing about them. And I just enjoy degeneracy in general. So, let's see what he has to say.
I always thought of myself as being left-wing. The more I looked into it, the more I realised, oh, I'm not left-wing. Actually, these people are crazy, and the world they're trying to bring into existence is probably going to be terrible, and so I think they should be stopped. They think this sounds like a nice ideal.
Yes.
It's not a nice ideal, actually. It's actually the end of what they claim to be to most value, which is diversity. Diversity comes from inequality, because equality means sameness. And if we're all the same, then there is no diversity. We're committed to a set of ideological demands that insist that we characterize the world through its own lens. And that, I think, is actually the most dangerous and pernicious part of this. Did you agree to that ideology? Do you agree with that ideology? You are forced to, whether you like it or not, through the strength of law.
As a white man.
This is the fundamental problem with Sargon. Cosmic Cynic says he was one of the big reasons anti-SJW community went to hell. Yeah, unfortunately, he was. He was actually probably like one of the biggest reasons for that. Because he was the biggest voice and he could have led it in a good direction, and he led it in the worst direction possible. This is the fundamental problem with Sargon. He has all of this catastrophic rhetoric about how the left threatens to like turn us into an Orwellian nightmare where you can't disagree with anybody. And then he totally ignores it when everyone on the right is doing the same thing but worse. It's just, oh my God, it's the most frustratingly stupid thing. I don't understand why he has this mental blind spot where he cannot see political correctness on the right as a problem. He only sees it as a problem when it's on the left. When it's left-wing people forcing you to conform to a certain ideological standard. Claudia says, you aren't forced to. I wrote a whole anti-egalitarian, anti-left, anti-right screed for school just a week ago. Or, sorry, and right. Anti-left and right. Okay, anti-right. Though I guess in some places it might be more heavily left. There have been interesting cases. Yeah, I mean, you hear about like woke censorship happening on the left and you know, woke mind policing on the left. I mean, it happens. It's not probably as ubiquitous as people like Sargon claim. But then it happens on the right all the fucking time. And he just doesn't care. He just doesn't care. He's so selective in his judgment. And the thing is, Sargon is smart enough that he could be a really good voice for liberalism, which is what he claims to be about. But he just chooses to be a dipshit constantly.
And I've had so many different advantages which are immeasurable, but possibly had an effect on where I am today.
Yeah, but how's it unfair that you've had those advantages?
Because they didn't and I did.
How's that unfair?
So he thinks that it's not unfair for one person to have an advantage that another person has. It's kind of a nuanced issue, but like, I would agree with this guy that it's unfair. Like, if one person is just born with an advantage that someone else doesn't have, that's obviously not fair. But it doesn't mean that that advantage shouldn't be conferred onto him. It just means that there's an inequality, and that inequality isn't just. But Sargon, I think there's like a block in his thinking because like he's right in that we shouldn't like begrudge people for their advantages. He's right about that. But then like he is unable to see the truth in the statement that like an inequality that isn't anyone's fault, an inequality that is just born and inherent, is unfair. And that doesn't necessarily mean we even need to do anything to change it, but we can at least acknowledge that it's not fair, right? That feels valid. Carl 2 says, I'm back. Wow, you're back already. Thank you, Carly. Well, the discussion, we're watching this Sargon interview because I saw it the other day and I was like, this could be good. I'm going to talk about this on stream. We're not going to watch the whole thing because it's long, but we're just going to skip around to the segments. Luckily, this guy's been kind enough to provide us with some chapters, so we can skip around to the chapters that I'm interested in watching. Yeah, Claudia Verdell, selective judgment good guy badges. That's what Sargon is. He's the very kind of people who Manson was criticizing in Get Your Gun. I don't know about the good guy badges, but definitely the selective judgment. But the catastrophizing, is that a word? Catastrophize. It's got to be, right? It doesn't sound right, but it's got to be right. The catastrophizing that Sargon does over the left isn't too far removed from what the right was doing back in the 90s with the Satanic Panic. They weren't attacking the left, they were attacking rock and roll and stuff, which I guess is tangentially related to the left. But it's very similar, because he's taking it. It's not as bad because the Satanic Panic was literally just a fiction. It was literally just a paranoid delusion. But what Sargon is doing is he's taking legitimate criticisms that he has of the left that are valid to some degree, and then he's just blowing them way out of proportion in a very selective way. Cosmic Cynic says Sargon is basically single-mindedly focused on opposing the SJWs. Yeah, and it's insane. Like, why did he start doing that? Why does he feel that he needs to keep doing this? Where there's selective judgment, a good guy badge will follow. Maybe. Let's continue.
I think that's the definition of unfairness, isn't it?
I don't agree.
Okay.
I've just been cancelled from a few...
We'll skip the Russell Brand part. Media trying to poison you. Skip that. Count Dankula. I'm wondering what they have to say about him. Because I know that Count Dankula is a friend of Sargon.
Who Count Dankula was. Suddenly, he's a Nazi. The word Nazi is associated with him on every newspaper article about him. And so the general public...
Yeah, and that's unfair. And that's the media always blowing stuff out of proportion. And they'll do that whether it's politically motivated or not. Because Count Dankula is a libertarian. He's not a Nazi. And he only trained his pug to salute Hitler as a joke to make his girlfriend mad. To prank his girlfriend, basically. And he had every right to do that. And it's a total joke that the Scottish government forced him to pay a fine of, what was it, £1,000? They basically just milked money out of him. They're just like, let's take this guy who we can exploit for a little bit of cash. But what's funny is that they spent way too many resources in trying to get that money out of him, so that it wasn't worth it in the end. They probably spent like thousands and thousands of dollars just trying to get this guy to pay $1,000 fine. And he went through every avenue he possibly could. I have a lot of respect for Dankula for what he did there. He did not back down. He went through every possible avenue, going to every single organization he could find that could rep for him, every union he could find that could rep for him, every court that he could go to, every higher and higher court that he could go to argue this case. And he spent a whole bunch of money on just trying to not spend that fine. He would have been willing to spend way more money if it meant he didn't have to pay that tiny little fine, because he valued the principle of it. And I like that.
Do I know anything about this guy? Why are they trying to poison me against this guy? That's what I think people would benefit from having just a consciousness of, because at least they would be in some way resisting the attempt to program them.
That, for anyone who doesn't know, Count Dankula is Mark Meechan, the Scottish...
The problem is that Dankula sided with the right after that. Well, yeah, I don't know if he was a libertarian before this issue or if he only became a libertarian after. I would have to look more into that. But that's kind of what Sargon does to people. Like he puts his hooks into people who are being victimized by the woke left, who don't deserve it. Like the Quartering was another one. That guy was victimized by the woke left. And then Sargon just was like, yes, you're mine now. I can take you. And then he just drags them into the right. And then they become these grifters.
Comedian,
He's a
YouTuber comedian who taught his dog to do a Nazi salute
because it was funny.
It is funny. It was funny,
and it was to wind up his wife.
Well, yeah, and he's someone we've we're both. I think I'm quite a bit friendly. I'm not friendly with him. I spoke to him 3 years ago. You are, and that's okay. And he got and that's something that I've been just talking with Helen Pluckrose about actually. That apparently in the UK it's much more common for police to investigate people for saying the wrong thing or whatever than it is in the US.
Have free speech.
Oh yeah, they've got First Amendment protections, so the government literally can't punish them for things that they say. Which is just a fantastic improvement on the situation in the UK, where people are persecuted for the things they say all the time. And the thing is, the police have got
used it. Used what? I respect liberal SJWs who stuck by their principles and did not move right. I assume you're talking about anti-SJWs? Yeah. Like the ones who kept their brains in their heads, unlike Sargon, are not the issue.
Natural incentive to desire to police the internet rather than, say, real life. It's actually a lot easier to police the internet. They can do it from a warm and heated office or air-conditioned office. And that's probably why 95% of burglaries go unsolved and thousands of people every year are actually arrested for posting things on social media.
That is mad.
It is mad, isn't it?
Is there anything that someone could say that you think is worthy of at least a police investigation?
Sure. I mean, if someone's, say, admitting to a crime or something, say, if someone says, well, I buried 3 bodies under this house or something, yeah, that's worthy of a police investigation.
Yeah, put that in the trailer. I buried 3 at the beginning of this video.
Feel free.
I agree with him on this free speech stuff, totally. That makes sense. Here's the way swear words changed.
Get into the nuts and bolts of this episode. I just wanted to ask you, did you know I have a new Clips channel? As part of the Heretics community, you really should at least know about it. Sometimes you're on the go, or you don't have enough time to watch the full interview, or you want to be reminded of some of the highlights. Just go to Heretics Clips. There's a link in the description, and subscribe to make sure you're getting the full Heretics experience and revisiting some of your favorite moments, such as Sonia Poulton on...
Yeah, it's so arbitrary and changeable as well. I mean, I've talked about it before, so apologies to those listening, but I'm a linguist as well. I speak a few languages, so I'm fascinated by like how those words became insulting. So now we have identity words.
Yeah,
those are the ones. So N-word, there's a K word and a Y word.
Like how there's like progressively more and more things that you aren't allowed to say because people love being offensive and people find ways of being offensive where they can be offensive and get away with it. And the more people do that, the more words they have to add onto this stupid list that you can't say. And I kind of just think instead of just increasingly expanding the list to include more and more things, why don't we just get over this fear we have of language? You know? Just get over it. Can we just stop with the silliness, please?
For Jews, there's F word for gay people. Everyone's now thinking those horrible words you mustn't say. 20 years ago, it was bodily functions and bodily aspects, fuck, shit, ass. I can say those words now. I can't say the C word. I could, but YouTube might punish me because that delves into the identity terrain as well as the...
But then 300 years before that, it was profanity, as in sacred words.
So
religious words, words about God, the devil, and no one thinks twice about any of those things. But that's where the concept of profanity comes from.
What will be next? So we've gone from religion to body to identity.
Claudia
I don't know
Bernella
what comes next.
Says,
John Matt Ward.
The more you say them, the less power they have. Making them untouchable gives them the power people so desperately don't want them to have. Yeah, that's the issue. It's like Voldemort. It's like people convince themselves that the name Voldemort has power. Now, in the last book, The Deathly Hallows, she did kind of a clever thing in actually giving the name real power so that you actually couldn't say it in that one. But up until that point, it was just a taboo. Like, oh, don't say his name. But that gives it power. Or Harry Potter doesn't make any sense. So what was it always? Did it always have that taboo, and that's why people stopped saying it, and they just never told Harry about that problem? I don't know. That might have been the case. They should have probably been a little bit clearer to him. But that's the issue with Harry Potter. You never know with Harry Potter if it's bad writing or if it's something else, because it's so convoluted. Old iDubbbz taught many of my generation that lesson. I have learned Tana Mongoose content cop. Yeah. And now iDubbbz thinks that it was a crime to just tell Tana to lighten up and stop being so politically correct. Like, I think he just had a crisis. Like, I don't even blame the guy. I'm not mad at iDubbbz for changing his mind. I think he's entitled to do that. He's entitled to move his life in a more positive direction. If he is uncomfortable with the amount of offense he was causing to people, that's totally his right, his decision. But like, it's unnecessary. I don't think he's obligated to do that. And I see people who agree with him being like, yeah, he totally is right to apologize. He totally needed to do that. And it's like, nah, I don't agree with that. Old iDubbbz would make a content cop on new iDubbbz. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I've heard he's had a lot of problems with hypocrisy and bitterness and stuff like that. Cosmic Cynic says, I actually did not realize the N-word was a taboo until I was like 11 or 12. Where are you from, Cosmic Cynic? Are you not American? Because I can't imagine that an American would have that experience.
Water once said to me, just as a random thing it could be, climate, something to do with the climate. So you'd call someone a windmill or something, or like an oil stain.
Possibly. I think it's going to be more about the comfort of the person's mind and mental state. So you already see the R word being stigmatized.
About assault. Okay, that makes sense.
No, different R word about people's mental capacity.
Okay, yes.
I don't know.
Slow in French.
Yes, slow in French, yeah, exactly.
What R word did he think it was?
No, different R word about people's mental capacity.
About assault.
No, different R word about people's mental capacity.
Okay, yes.
I don't know.
Slow in French.
Yes, slow in French, yeah, exactly.
Or late.
Yes, that's become a stigmatized word, because I think it really all comes down to the sense of disquietude that a person feels in their own mind. It's about their own sense of mental balance, and I think that's what is ultimately trying to be. I think they're trying to protect it, but of course there are consequences to doing that as well.
Yeah, I agree with him on this. Like, we don't need to make retarded a bad word. Does the left run the media? Okay, this will be interesting, because here's the thing about that. Someone like Sargon will probably say the left runs the media. And it might seem like that from his perspective as an Englishman who is against sort of left-wing social politics. But then when you look at particularly what's going on in America, with how genuine left-wing voices are so often undermined by the mainstream media, like CNN, like when they pose a threat to the kind of center-right status quo, like Bernie Sanders. they did so much to kind of lie and distort around Bernie Sanders to prevent that guy from winning, that it's really difficult for me to take it seriously when people say that the media is run by the left. I don't think the media is run by the left. I think that the media is able to use left-wing social politics to advance a kind of hypocritical agenda that they have, which is that they want to keep this kind of center-right, we could call it New Labor, we could call it Blue Dog Democrat, we could, this sort of like fake left-wing politics in power. They don't want to actually empower people economically. And they use left-wing social politics to do that. So they attack people who are genuine leftists by using their own politics against them, which is very smart. Because these genuine leftists will agree with like, we can't be racist, we can't be anti-Semitic. They'll agree with all that. And their followers will agree with all that. And so then they use that as a weapon against those people to take them down. So it's very insidious in that way. But if you're just a right-winger looking at it, you don't see a difference. You don't see a difference between the establishment left and the real left. And so you lack the nuance and the cultural, political context to really understand even what's going on, I think. RFK Jr. this time around. Yeah, but RFK Jr. is a joke. RFK Jr. is a dipshit. I don't know. I don't know if I can assent to that, because he seems to I haven't seen him actually deliver a real message. His message just basically seems to me, I want to be president. I think I would be a good president. I'm related to John F. Kennedy, and that would make me a good president. And the only other thing I know about him is that he's anti-vax. So, like, why would I like this guy? I don't know. He's definitely a goofy goober. Yeah. He doesn't... Yeah, I don't see him as a threat to any establishment, really. Because he doesn't even have anyone... He doesn't even have a movement. He's pretending that he has a movement. I don't think anyone really takes him seriously.
But I don't think anyone can reasonably say the media is actually serving the public interest at this point. It seems that the media, frankly, has been captured by probably being bought off, but also through ideology, to be the defenders of the status quo at the moment. And so anyone who comes up who seems to be challenging the status quo is rendered as some sort of enemy of the state. And so the media isn't really acting in the best interest of the general public, but they are acting in the best interest of, I guess, what you could term the managerial elite, that think that actually everything should be controlled by some people remotely who know how things should be, which is pretty awful, I think.
One thing you said is that the media is very left wing. I'm hearing people listening saying, "Oh, hang on, Murdoch owns so much of it," and I know you said Daily Mail is a bit schizophrenic, but it's not a left wing.
No, it's not. It's not a left wing institution itself, but the Daily Mail is one paper.
The Sun, Fox News.
That's three.
So relatively, you'd say there's
far more. There's far more on the left, and it's normal. You know, it's just the way the media has been for a long time. It's hard to think of any impactful... I mean, the BBC recently had to do a reorganization within their own ranks because they admitted their own liberal bias. And it was like, okay, why would they have to do that? The BBC meant to be the bastion of neutrality in the country. It's like, yeah, actually, we're really liberal and we need to...
Yeah, CNN kind of went through something like that, too, where they realized that the quality of their reporting was going downhill. and that they were losing objectivity, and that they're becoming like this really weird kind of I don't know, just bad news station. And so they did a lot of reorganizing from what I heard, and they made a big deal out of that. Like, yeah, we see the criticism, and we agree this is not going in the right direction, which I can kind of respect, I guess that's good.
Change that, and if we don't change that, we're going to continue to alienate ourselves from the British public, who actually aren't particularly liberal, who are actually really quite far right in a lot of ways. But those people don't get to have any representation. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like, if you look at BBC Question Time, like, it's always the same. It's 3 liberals and 1 milquetoast conservative.
And Jimmy Carr.
And well, occasionally Jimmy Carr. Yeah, but whenever, it's a political, slate, it's always like a Guardian journalist, the Green Party member, and then someone who writes for the Telegraph. And it's like, the Telegraph, that's the right now, is it? That's the entire representation right-wing thought in Britain gets. And it's just very frustrating.
I get really wound up, especially, I talked about cancellations, and there's things I can't go around the world and do.
I'm interested in this part, which is Carl's journey from left to right. Because this is the thing that I find most interesting about Sargon, is how he identified as a left-wing person and then totally changed in the opposite direction. So let's hear him talk about this.
Do it. And I was like, and they were like, yeah, but we'll get a translator. So I was like, right. Anyway, that's why that was BBC Channel 4. Yeah. And so I know about that. Bloody hell.
Doesn't seem very just, does it?
No, and it there was that. Have you seen that? Disney I guess Prince. it was Colin Wright. I think the Swipe Right Twitter. And Elon Musk recently retweeted it of like, here's me on the center left, and here's the far left person, my comrade or whatever, and here's the right, and then gradually that person on the far left shouting, you're a bigot, and then here's me moving to the right, and I feel that. I felt that happen. I felt that movement of like, oh, I'm not allowed in this tribe anymore.
That happened to me too.
Yeah. So what happened to you?
Well, just the same thing. I took objection to the way that the left... I always thought of myself as being left-wing, but I didn't know much about left-wing philosophy at the time, and the more I looked into it, the more I realised, I'm not left-wing, and actually these people are crazy, and the world they're trying to bring into existence is probably going to be terrible, and so I think they should be stopped.
It has some nice ideas in the left, sort of share the wealth.
Wealth is always shared. Like, that's not their idea. Like kings used to literally give out money after looting a city to their nobles to keep the nobles happy. Like,
but did the nobles then give it to the peasants?
They've got no choice. They've got to pay the peasants for the labor. Like, otherwise they won't do it. So
that's what the fuck is he talking about? Okay. Claudia says, I can't tell whether he'd be shoved into a locker or shoving people into them. Are you talking about the interviewer? He doesn't strike me as either one of those. Tucker Carlson was saying something interesting like that on Joe Rogan recently. But these guys just went a completely different direction. I really wish I could remove this stupid heart in the corner. God, it blocks what you guys are saying on OBS. I wonder. Nope, I can't do it there. Yeah, the interviewer. It's the jawline. Yeah, he has a cute face. But, what are they talking about here? Oh, yeah, sorry. So what is this point he's making? He's saying, but the wealth was always shared. That's not what people mean. Paying people for their labor is not what people mean by sharing the wealth. That's not what people mean, dude. That's, like, are you seriously... Like, what is this argument? This is so dumb. Oh, people have always shared the wealth. No, that's not what... Paying people isn't the same as sharing the wealth.
Well, wealth has always circulated. Like, this isn't some sort of new innovation that the left have come up.
The idea is that it's not distributed fairly. The idea is that some people, because they're in a position where they hoard the wealth themselves to the disadvantage of the people who help them acquire that wealth. And, you know, to some people, they would see that as, oh, it's their right to do that because they're the ones who took the initiative to set up that capital arrangement. But I think there's another way of looking at that where we can see that this system overall, when you look at the amount of good it's doing versus the amount of bad it's doing, it certainly is doing us some good in circulating wealth. It's very good at that. But there's so much that's inefficient about that system that it's good to seek alternatives. It's good to try to look beyond that and think, can we make this work a little bit better so that we can get more money into the bottom of the economy? And that's really what this guy was talking about. And I know a lot of people don't like fascists, but if you actually read what this guy's agenda was, it very much was a left-wing agenda. He was saying we need to get more money into the bottom of the economy through socialism, through using what he called revolution by reason. So using the power of the government to use a planned economy techniques in order to accomplish that, in order to accomplish the goal that socialists want, without necessarily using the same means that socialists would use.
Up with. The left's innovation is to make it so that we all have the same wealth. They want us to all ultimately be the same. And that's actually...
He's a very underrated thinker, and I think it's irritating when I see like nothing but the identity politics of it brought up. Because I don't even really know how bad he was on identity politics. I haven't really properly investigated that, and I think it does require a certain amount of investigative technique and journalism to uncover kind of what the truth is between the conflicting stories, because it does seem like there's a lot that doesn't add up there. So I can't really comment on that side of things. And I kind of wish I could. I'm still learning about this guy, and I still have a lot of work to do in trying to learn his story. But man, when you really look at what he was about fundamentally, I think the left should get behind his message on that basic level, at least.
Actually a really evil prospect if you think about it, because that means that someone who does no work at all is entitled to exactly what I have, exactly what you have, which is not fair.
See, I like Hanlon's razor, and maybe to the point
that we all have the same wealth. They won't do it. So wealth has always circulated. Like, this isn't some sort of new innovation that the left have come up with. The left's innovation is to make it so that we all have the same wealth. They want...
Is he literally saying that people who don't work are going to have the same wealth as someone who does?
Us to all ultimately be the same. And that's actually a really evil prospect if you think about it, because that means that someone who does no work at all is entitled...
Yeah, that's his argument. Why is he taking this extreme far left, like, full commie argument, and then basically saying, yeah, that's what the left believes? That is, the vast majority of the left would not get behind that idea. That, like, I'll bring up this guy again. One of the things that he said was basically, in his ideal society, you work for what you get. So if you're getting money, you're going to earn that money. And I basically agree with that idea, that I think that people are probably entitled to more than they currently get. But what you get should be stuff that you work for. Unless, of course, you're in a position where you have a disability that makes it hard for you to contribute. But even in those cases, I think we can always find applications for those people, for the most part, things that they can do.
To exactly what I have, exactly what you have, which is not fair.
See, I like Hanlon's razor, and maybe to the point of being naive, but I'm just sticking to it. The idea that it's not necessarily out of evil, but maybe stupidity. I mean, you said yourself you were quite left wing.
It's not even evil. It is evil, but it's not that the people are evil. It's that they think this sounds like a nice ideal.
Yes,
it's not a nice ideal. Actually, it's actually the end of what they claim to be to most value, which is diversity. Diversity comes from inequality, because equality means sameness. And if we're all the same, then there is no diversity. And this is the problem with liberalism. It is a great homogenizing.
No, I would disagree. He says diversity comes from inequality. I would argue that's the opposite. I would argue that inequality comes from diversity. Because if you have people with different characteristics, then they're going to be at different levels of advantage. But it also, there's, like, this is not an entirely meritocratic system. And that's something that Sargon, I think, is struggling with putting together, and the right in general struggles, is that they think of capitalism as an entirely meritocratic economy. It is to some degree. But the problem is that you have to have a lot more merit in order to rise above a much lower station. So if you already have a certain advantage, you don't need as much merit in order to maintain that advantage. So it's not entirely meritocratic in that way. It's not entirely equal opportunity.
Force that seeks to turn everything into the same thing, and they don't know when to stop.
What do we do then with the idea that there's 8 billion people on the planet, there's a whole bunch in the UK, some were born like in a bin, and I went to private school and had a nice life. And we don't want equity, because that's just ridiculous. But what do we do? Do we just go, well, that's your lot?
Well, I think that the most important thing for people is to feel that they're being treated fairly. Right? That's because as soon as we get off of ideological language like equity, equality, liberty, all this sort of stuff, and say, okay, but on the basis of how we feel about these things, am I being treated fairly? And so there was an example, I think it was in Cheshire, of a young chap who had looked his entire life to join the police force, and so he'd got the right qualifications, he'd done the right training, and they denied him on the fact that he was a white man, and he sued them successfully over that.
Brilliant.
Right? And this is obviously unfair. It's not fair that because he is a white man, it's not fair that because you're a white man that you shouldn't get to promote and present your own documentaries. That's just not fair. Like that's not right. And we don't need a massive ideological apparatus to come to that conclusion. Any person can come to that conclusion as their own personal judgment.
Well, if you were to strongman their argument, would it not be, as a white man, I've had so many different advantages which are immeasurable, but possibly had an effect on where I am today?
Yeah, but how's it unfair that you've had those advantages?
Because they didn't and I did.
How's that unfair?
I think that's a definition of unfairness, isn't it?
I don't agree. Just because you've got something and I don't have something, it doesn't mean it's unfair.
But I didn't work for it. I just was given it without having to do anything.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's unfair.
So what would be unfair?
Unfair is something that happens despite you deserving this thing. So, for example, you deserve what you have because your parents gave it to you. There's no one more deserving than the things that a parent gives to their child, right? No one else deserves my love that I give to my children more than my children deserve it. No one is more deserving of that.
But then if we flip that, the child that's born in a bin, they deserve that?
No, I'm not saying they do.
Isn't that the flip side, though? If we all deserve...
Yeah, Sargon, and that's the concept of unfairness that he's trying to communicate. I hope that Sargon catches on to this, because right now it seems like he's not getting it. Like this is not a complicated idea. That there is an unfairness in inequality. I will agree with Sargon that I think perhaps maybe people they default to this idea of equality and inequality too much, and what they really should be talking about is fairness. I think that's accurate. I've felt that way the whole time. Like, I've always been against the phrase income inequality, because I think what people are really talking about is income fairness, and that's I think the problem. I don't think there's anything wrong with having income inequality. I think that totally makes sense. But the problem is that income isn't distributed fairly enough. And so it's creating a problem where there's a lot of poverty and squalor at the bottom of the economy, which isn't good for anyone. I don't think anyone likes that state of affairs. But they just kind of make excuses for it, even though they don't personally like it, just so that they don't have to part with their cash.
Of the place that we're sort of born into.
No, it's not that there aren't unfairnesses, right? There are unfairnesses, but that doesn't mean just because someone has something good that was given to them through unfair means. For example, if I don't know anything about your situation, but say your dad works very hard all of his life and can afford to send you to a private school.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, he was working class and
well, there
worked
we go.
hard.
But
I didn't.
Sure, but that doesn't mean it's not. That doesn't mean it's unfair. Like, the means through which your dad acquired the wealth to be able to send his son to a private school.
It's not unfair that he has an advantage. It's unfair that we treat people as if they don't have merit because they are disadvantaged. That's the problem. The problem is that capitalism is set up to give no support to people who are at a disadvantage through no fault of their own. That's the unfair aspect.
Was totally fair. There's no injustice that takes place in that line, right? And so that you have something that someone else doesn't have, doesn't an injustice make? And I'm not saying that it isn't an injustice that someone else is born in a bin, sure. But then you look at, okay, well, who put them in the bin? Like, their parents.
That was also my dad, unfortunately. He was a bit of a terror.
Maybe on that case. But the point is that there isn't a necessary connection between these two things. And so to arrive at the point we're at now and say, well, you're going to have to lose what you were fairly given for what someone else, to rectify an unfairness someone else experienced that wasn't at the hands of anything that any of the people who brought you to where you are, that's an injustice in and of itself.
It's a really difficult one. I get what you're saying, and I've thought about this recently because a friend was saying, there was an article, I don't know if it was at the BBC or wherever it was, that most people, a higher percentage of people had been at private school who ended up going to these high jobs and things. And it wasn't that high, but it was higher than the percentage of state school people, but it was lower. It was like 20% are from private schools, even though only a few percent actually go to private schools, something like that. And I was thinking, like, oh yeah, that is an unfair advantage. And then I thought, but there has to be some reason that the parents made the sacrifices to send their kids to that school.
Yeah.
I think we make an assumption that everyone who sent their kids to private schools is like living in a helicopter or something. I don't know whether that's the thing. All rich people live in helicopters in my mind. But a lot of them made, probably most of them made huge sacrifices. And
different. Oh wow, this is actually a long segment. I'm wondering if they talk about anything else in
non-left-wing lens. Actually, fairness could be charity. It could be helping someone out. It could be doing something for someone else, but it doesn't mean reducing someone else. It doesn't mean taking something away from someone, especially if, your case is a good example. What you have accumulated wasn't accumulated through exploitation. It wasn't accumulated unfairly. So why the hell should anyone have the right to take that away from you?
It's a philosophical debate about...
Well, I would agree with that idea in abstract. The problem is that when you have these people who've hoarded massive, massive, massive amounts of wealth that they don't need. That don't, like, there's a certain threshold where you pass it and your quality of life doesn't improve the more wealth you have. I think it's $70,000. People who have billions and billions of dollars, they don't need those extra billions. And then there are other people who can't even make ends meet. Is the labor of that billionaire, that multi-billionaire, really worth billions times more than the labor of that person who can't make ends meet? No. So there's a question of proportionality here. I would agree with the general sentiment that Sargon is saying, that it's not, that we shouldn't punish people who have advantages just in the name of fairness. The problem is that if you're making an argument like this, you are blinding yourself to the absurd proportionality of the situation.
About fairness, and the macrocosm there is my father worked really hard, his parents worked hard, and second generation before that they were poverty stricken and just moved in, so there's that movement up the chain. They've all worked hard, they've instilled in me the value of hard work and all of those things, and that on a macrocosm it's it's the epitome of fair. On a microcosm, I'm born with a season ticket to Spurs and a private school education, and some people have a very, very difficult life.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that that's unfair. That's the thing. And the thing that underpins this conception of the world is a kind of Rawlsian view of what the world should be like. And so John Rawls is a liberal philosopher, very famous for his veil of ignorance thought experiment. Okay. He said, look, if you knew you were going to be born, but you didn't know what kind of world you'd be born into, what kind of world would you choose to be born into before you were born? So if you wouldn't say, oh, I don't want to be born into a world with slavery, because you might be a slave. You don't know that you'd be a slave. And so you roll the dice, oh, you got a 1, now you're born as a slave. And so you in the original position would say, well, I don't want to be born into a world of slavery because I might be, but all that means is that you want to be born into the communist utopia, right? Because you don't want to take any chance that, oh, there might be something that's bad. So I want to be sure that I'm always going to have exactly as how much money or wealth I need. I want, to be born into a world that's got a pleasant temperature all year round. You're gonna make up a fantastical utopian position, which will never happen, right? And so the problem with this sort of thought experiment is what it presumes is actually that you have the power and authority to change anything about the world, right? So, because when you look at what you've done in your little hypothetical here, you've ascribed to yourself the power to determine, I'm going to take that person's stuff away and give it to someone else. So
you could make this very same argument back in the 18th century justifying feudalism. You could be like, oh yeah, you might like living in a world where everyone has equal rights, but that assumes that you have the power to change anything. Well, clearly people have demonstrated that we have the power to change things. So, yeah, there's no reason to assume that we can't affect a change like this. This is just defeatist thinking.
This is like godlike power that you've assumed that you're entitled to in remaking the world to eliminate unfairness. And it's like, I'm sorry, I just don't see where the authority for that power comes from. Where's the authority for me to take away your good fortune and give it to someone else come from? I don't have any right to take away the...
In your opinion. But, rights are subjective. There's no such thing as natural rights. And that's something that I think Sargon disagrees with. Sargon, I've heard him say in the past, in his conversation with V, where V was like, rights come from the government. And Sargon was like, no, everyone has inherent rights and the government only protects those rights. That's a very old school liberal opinion that he for some reason believes, even though there's no metaphysical reality to that statement. It's just bullshit. It's always been bullshit. And it's always been something that I can understand saying it back in the 18th century when you needed to come up with some mumbo jumbo some religious explanation for something to justify a political change like that. But in the 21st century, do we really need to believe this kind of stuff? Authority, rights, all that, it's all down to opinion. It's all down to what you think is necessary for the functioning of a proper society. And so I could say that, yeah, the government does have the authority to redistribute wealth. And that opinion would be no more invalid than Sargon's opinion.
The things that you've got, and me complaining, well, I mean, it's just unfair that you get to have the nice things you have. Well, A, you can't demonstrate any unfairness, and B, I don't think that is unfair, and C, if I then...
Not according to some people, the entire point of politics is to keep things exactly the same.
and arbitrarily took it away from you because someone else doesn't have that, that's very unfair. So I think really it's the way we conceive of the world.
Like Sargon will benefit from changes made by radical liberals in the past. Sargon's ideology would have been considered radical left back in the 18th century, before the Jacobins. You know, I think the Jacobins kind of took it a little bit further to the left, and he would have been more of a centrist by that point. But in like the 1750s, this would have been considered more of like a radical left position that he has. And so, yeah, it doesn't, like, he benefits from changes made by radicals in the past. And then he acts like this state of affairs is just the way things are. Oh, this is just the way it is, bruh. Yeah. Who said you had the power to change anything? I don't know. Tell that to the people who believed what you believe hundreds of years ago.
Because what we've done is approached this with sort of the mindset of some sort of football manager, right? Mm-hmm. It's like we're playing a football manager game. We're like, right, okay, we're going to mess around with the entire team. It's like, no. The team is not, this isn't a team. This is people's real lives. This is our entire country. You know, people actually get to do things with their own life that you aren't in control of. And the fact that you can't accept that as the sort of liberal manager is the problem. That's the problem. You've got to accept that there are limits to what you can do, and they don't. And this is all of our politicians buy into this kind of framework. We're like, well, we're just going to start moving things around and take things away. We're going to start taxing you this. It's like, this is my money you're taking away. This is my labor, my effort, my heart, my sweat that I've put into getting all of this. And you're just like, yeah, so we're just going to crank up the taxes on you. It's like...
But the labor theory of... So you're saying you agree with the labor theory of value then? That all the money that you get is because it's proportionate to how much you worked. That's not the labor theory of value, but it's connected to that idea, I guess. Like, I think what the left are saying is that the system of capitalism empowers people to disproportionately enrich themselves on the labor of other people. Again, it's a very basic idea that I don't know why he's having so much trouble understanding.
That's an injustice, you idiots, you know. and they don't understand that these are people's lives that they're ruining.
Yeah. Well, oh my God, it's so complicated. I'm not. By the way, those aren't necessarily my views. I'm just.
I know you're steel manning the opposing.
I said strong manning, didn't I?
Yeah, it's fine.
Keep doing that. I've done it like 5 times, then had to delete it and put steel manning.
Yeah.
Like voiceover after steel manning. Why do I want to call it strong manning? That's probably like some weird like gay porn that I've been secretly watching and I've inadvertently admitted now.
I can tell you had a private education.
It wasn't a boarding school or anything like that. Those guys. No,
why is the soggy biscuit game always on a rich tea?
It's always what?
A rich tea.
A rich tea? What do you mean?
Biscuit. Rich tea.
Is that a type of biscuit?
Yeah.
I'm just beyond biscuits. I don't know the names of biscuits.
Transcended biscuits.
I've transcended biscuits. But is it that? Is that the biscuit?
I have no idea.
Is it a posh biscuit? Is that why?
No, it's a really plain biscuit.
Yeah. The soggy. Don't look up the soggy biscuit game, anyone. It's a really interesting points, all of them. However, it's still in the interest of the wealthy in a country, I think, to pay those kinds of taxes because you don't want a country where there's just people dying all over the street.
Sure, and there are lots of ways to make sure that you don't have people dying all over the street. A total redistribution of wealth isn't one of them, actually.
Okay.
Well, it hasn't worked anywhere, right?
Like what argument is Sargon responding to? Because he keeps bringing up this like radical far left communist agenda, and it's like, who are you talking to? Like, a total redistribution of wealth. What does that mean to you? Whose argument are you talking about? Because like, your standard Jeremy Corbyn Labor voter, are they really going to be that far left? I don't think so. So it's just weird. It's like he's taking the most uncharitable view of the left and then using that as his argument against the entirety of the left. Like, do you understand that there's moderation and nuance here? Because it seems like he's like, yeah, there are ways we can prevent poverty. And it's like, all right, well, I'm all open ears. That's why I kept listening. I was like, I'm all ears, guy. Tell me the ways that we can address the poverty situation. And then he doesn't say anything, and he instead just attacks the far left straw man that he's... It's not technically a straw man because it's a real argument, but it's like he's attacking this as if it's a straw man for the entirety of the left. And it makes me wonder, like, how disingenuous is this? Like, and how conservative really is Sargon? But let's see, let's look in the chapters and see if there's... Okay, the next one is called What Liberal Actually Means. I'm kind of interested in this one.
It's like ingrained in them, and it's a weird thing because even though they've got this like far right, they've had far right dictatorships, they go very left, and it's a different kind of left over there because it's like a nationalistic left, which we don't get here. We associate nationalism with poppies and army and right wing and vigilante hunters for some reason, and on the that's just what they're all into. And on the left, not that kind of pride. It's actually, we hate this country. And it's so funny, you go to, you see how just, again, arbitrary values like nationalism, it can be either side, can't it? Or the Argentine left, just Argentina flags, Maradona, Peron. Weird.
Yeah, it's kind of like the sort of Labour of the 70s in this country, isn't it?
An essay about nationalism last week where I talked
about
left,
just Argentina flags, Maradona, Peron. Weird.
Yeah, it's kind of like the sort of Labour of the 70s in this country, isn't it?
Don't know. I wasn't about.
Well, I wasn't either, but
I've never read books either.
I've read a few. But the sort of old Tony Benn style Labour, where it was rooted in the sort of working man of the country, but of course that's all disappeared now.
When I was younger, liberal meant left wing.
Yeah,
that's kind of.
Now I'm hearing liberal about the right.
Labour that I've been hearing is that Labor is just full of a bunch of hypocrites, a bunch of snobby, I'm better than you hypocrites, and that they're not really in touch with the average working man in the way they used to be, which is a real shame that that's the best they can do over in Great Britain.
Is liberal a thing away? Liberalism, liberal? Explain what these mean, and are they away from the left and right?
So liberalism is the philosophy that emerged in the 17th and 18th centuries that was abstracted from English tradition. So English tradition has always focused around the rights of Englishmen. And
actually, I have a video coming out either today or tomorrow. I had export troubles today. I was trying to get it out. I was trying to export it this morning, and it couldn't export, so I'm going to see if I can export it tonight. But I have a video coming out that addresses this directly, all of this that he's saying, and it even talks about Sargon in that portion of the video. So it's actually kind of interesting that we're talking about Sargon and English liberalism in this stream, because I'm coming out with a video which addresses it soon.
Ancient and settled customs and liberties that the English enjoyed, because these were actually deeply envied by people almost everywhere, especially on the European continent.
That's what's so
because
fascinating
it
about
was
England. England, there's this kind of exceptionalism about England with its liberal tradition that that liberalism started in England and Scotland. And there's a reason for it, and it's because England was always, in some ways, a more liberal country than other countries in Europe. And it's so fascinating, and it really makes me wonder why that is. But it's a subject I want to keep learning about, because I really like. The more I look into England, the more I see what a fantastically exceptional country it is in certain respects. It's getting pretty late for me. Nice talking to you. All right, Cosmic Cynic. Going away.
Long held that the King of England wasn't a tyrant, and he was one of the few kings that wasn't a tyrant. And this is what Magna Carta is about, this is what habeas corpus is about, this is what the Bill of Rights is about. And you'll notice that in each of these documents, they all cite the ancient liberties and customs of the English. And so in, I think it's the 17th century or 18th century, you get various legal philosophers like Blackstone who end up kind of codifying what the rights of Englishmen are. And then you get John Locke at the end of the 17th century abstracting that into the rights of man. And that's where you see in the American Declaration of Independence and the American Constitution the rights of man. In the French Revolution, you get the rights of man and citizen. So it's a suite of historic and traditional rights that has been taken and put into a doctrine that then can be taken anywhere in the world and imposed. Now, what that means is that it renders every society that is imposed onto it as being illegitimate. So it doesn't happen in somewhere like England or America, and the revolutions there are...
interesting thing about that is British fascism, as a result of this history, was a very liberal version of fascism. It was a version of fascism which thought that people had rights.
Are actually not totalizing and destructive, because if things are being done in the way they've always done, to have someone parrot that doctrine back at you, say, well, yeah, that's how we do things. And so everyone just goes, right, okay, fair enough, that's how we do things. But if you say go to France, then you realize that actually things are very different. They've got the ancient regime, and I'm not pronouncing it correctly, and it's a very different society. The institutions that built up in England to support the rights of Englishmen obviously don't exist in France. And so now they've got the universal rights of man, which is a great leveling exercise. Whereas in England, actually, the rights of Englishmen were like kind of like a union, like against the person above you. So you would have this almost sort of spiritual theory of the rights of Englishmen that would be appealed to against someone who you felt was doing wrong to you. And this was well supported. It was something the English were very proud of. But when it comes to France, it's a very different beast. And so now it's the universal rights of all humanity. It's like, okay, that's very different, because if you've got a particular and parochial view of rights that's centered and grounded in a historic continuum.
But like, as he said, John Locke had the same idea. He extrapolated that into the rights of man. So they really just took the English idea of John Locke and transposed it into France. Like Lafayette got it from the Anglosphere. Of course, what's interesting is that you see when the French didn't have a liberal tradition of their own like that, they interpreted it in a different way, and thus you get Jacobinism, which was a very radical kind of liberalism that in some ways wasn't very liberal at all, because it was very authoritarian, despite its insistence on protecting the rights of man. So it kind of became a little bit hypocritical, but it kind of needed to do that because it was under threat, in the same way that the Marxist-Leninists needed to kind of subvert the whole message of communism in order to maintain their power. So it's interesting how France struggled to get to where Great Britain already kind of was. That's not to say that Great Britain didn't have a long way to go in their progressive agenda as well. But at least they had a political culture that could kind of foster that in a way that the French didn't. And they had a much harder time with that.
At a particular geographic location, that
Claudia
takes on a kind of homely, sort of natural perspective, especially as there was no one document that everyone agreed to. But in France, you instead have to simply reformat
The Empire was right in Star Wars. Okay, that's interesting.
Country, and that's exactly what they did. They took a rationalist approach to reconstructing France. So they began at year zero. They reformatted all of the districts into roughly equal sizes. They decided that everyone has exactly the same rights, and it's like, okay, but nobody actually has exactly the same rights. Like, everyone's right to things is actually kind of different, actually. You know, my right to my house is not your right to my house, and things like this. And so in the French Revolution, you see the seeds of what comes after it. You see the seeds of fascism in its excessive nationalistic tendencies. You see the seeds of communism in its excessive leveling tendencies. You see the seeds of liberalism in its desire to have a much more open and less stratified society. And what this does, though, is it renders all of the world as being basically immoral. And so now liberalism takes on a crusading aspect, right? We've got to change Germany, we've got to change Spain, we've got to change all of these things. And this is what we're seeing to this day. And so the question of left and right comes from the French Assembly. And the question of left and right, it
was brought up a few streams of yours ago. Was it? Yeah, I guess it was. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Empire from Star Wars. But I guess I'll listen to the argument.
Reason these things are left and right is it was a question of, should the king have a veto over us? I can't remember what the topic was now, but it's actually kind of trivial. And should the king have a veto? And the people who didn't think so sat on the left, and the people who did think so sat on the right. And so basically this came to mean the forces of tradition versus the forces of progress. And so liberalism was on the very vanguard of the forces of progress until it got to a certain point at which people felt roughly that this was where we should be. And then it kept going. And it kept going. And so now there are the people who you would say are classical liberals, like Margaret Thatcher. She's a very liberal figure. Right? You can't end up with the phrase, there's no such thing as society, without being an extremely doctrinaire liberal. And she was what we would call a neoliberal now. Big fan of Hayek and various other Austrian school economists. Deeply liberal in the way that she constructs the world. But she is now a right-wing figure, because liberalism has continued to go to the left. The force of progress have gone on. And so now we're far beyond that. So Margaret Thatcher is now a far-right figure.
Yeah, they really go ham on the world building.
That shows you how much further to the left things have gone. And now we're literally at the point where we only discuss minority issues. Like, we're not allowed to discuss majoritarian issues because that is some form of racism, that's some form of oppression. And one of the congenital things about liberalism is it seeks universal recognition. So if you have a group of people who are a majority and you have a group of people who are a minority, well, liberalism will always find the minority more legitimate than the majority, because there will be a notable power imbalance, and this will cause a differential in recognition. And so the minority becomes essentially a locus of morality because it is oppressed, and the majority will become a locus of immorality because it is an oppressor, because it restricts the amount of recognition that the minority can have. And if you're seeking equal recognition, well, the large group's always going to be bad. And so that's why in this country, all we ever talk about are minority issues, and we can't talk about what the average English working family's concerns are. They're not represented anywhere.
Can't we say, if I believe I'm liberal, can't I say that when it was where it was 50?
I'm very confused about that line that he was going for there. Like, he was saying that liberalism focuses on the minority, but he claims to be a liberal. Just about where he's going with that.
15 years ago. I'm also concerned about parroting what generations before me have said. You know, oh, back when I was younger. You end up sort of saying these things and catching yourself and going, oh, God. But back in the sort of early 2000s or whatever it was, where there was still enough room to make jokes that were like funny and a bit offensive, but that's okay. I mean, I'm Jewish, and I used to be able to accept Jewish jokes. Now I'm very sensitive to them because they often come from woke people, and I'm like, well, hang on, you won't let me even say anything about anything else, and yet you're willing to make the jokes about, oh, have you paid for your dinner and that kind of thing. I used to find that funny when I was younger. How sad that society's moved in such a way we can't have a joke. We can't. Mark Meacham, of course, was a great example of that. That's quite funny. I spoke to David Baddiel, who I we've become quite friendly, but he's much woker than I am. And he, I don't want to sort of dob him in it or whatever when he's not here to defend himself, but he seems to believe that this woke hierarchy of race or whatever, that it's okay, but why aren't the Jews in it? And I'm going, well, isn't that like the litmus test?
Why do we want to be in it at all? Well, I'm not a Jew, but like, why would anyone want to be in it?
Well, it's the canary in the coal mine, isn't it? If there is one person who's just left out for no reason, then you go, or whatever reason, and you go, okay, this is actually bunk. There's something wrong with this whole hierarchy. We can't just say, oh, now we're in it, it's fine. And then all the sort of white people who are not Jewish don't get to have,
I don't know why that was a very replayed section. I was waiting for there to be something interesting there. I thought there would be like a funny joke there, but no. Trans ideology madness, that sounds interesting.
And it will continue. And you already see the seeds of it, where you've got the LGBTQ, IA double plus, blah, 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 blah. All of these things that are getting tagged on are just smaller divisions of minority identity. And eventually almost everything will be on there. And so this, I don't think, has got any signs of stopping. And in fact, I think that if you go back to the philosophers who first invented this, part of it is a kind of Heideggerian constant destruction. Marcusean constant destruction, where the point is
he's bringing up some
the reduction of what came before to the end point, where everyone has equal recognition.
Dr. Ian McGilchrist was saying that every empire begins to analyze itself too much and falls apart. Is that in line with what you're saying?
It's definitely why liberalism is able to operate in the way that it does. I mean, if we were in the middle of a giant war or something like that, we wouldn't be talking about any of this, right? If the Germans were flying overhead, no one was saying, yeah, but I don't feel we're being liberal enough.
This is the thing, because, so I lived in Argentina 6 years, and I have family there now and all of that stuff. And whenever I've spoken to friends and family friends and things like that over there, it's actually funny to see a lot of the older people are very on board with the trans thing when we first start talking about it.
Right.
So when I first start saying, I'd mentioned one or two things, and it was so funny because I immediately was like, people were so shocked around the table. We're talking in Spanish about, and I was just like, well, it's got a bit ridiculous that they actually had to say to each other. I heard them sort of look at me and go like, it must be a language problem. He's misunderstood what he said there. You didn't mean that, Andrew, did you? And I had to gradually say, no, but you don't realize in England it's very different to what it is here, because over there it's like the old kind of the classic transphobia, this kind of like, I hate this person because they are weird and different from me or whatever, and they get killed in the woods or whatever happens.
Jesus,
that happens, and not by me or my father. I spoke of before, going around killing people.
As we coming back to the if someone confesses to a crime,
yes, in the woods, does it happen? That's another point as well. No, so.
I expected to be commenting a lot more on this video, which is why I decided to play it on stream. And I was earlier on in the video, but now I'm getting to the point where I'm just fascinated by this conversation for the most part. I just want to know where it's going. So I'm gonna keep watching it until I get to the end of whatever I want to watch, the chapters that I want to watch in this. But I guess I apologize for being a little bit quiet at this point in the stream, because I am just interested in seeing where this is going. I hope that you are too. I hope that you're also enjoying this.
And then I started explaining, but it's like, but you don't want them to play in sports with girls, and they're like, oh God, no. And I was like, okay. In prisons and in these kinds of, and every time they're like, what? No. The point being, they are on such a different level, because like half the country can't eat. This is nonsense to them. So they're just going like, oh no, you should be nice to this oppressed minority. Don't think much more about it.
Don't murder this person. Yes, I won't murder this person. Correct. But also, I don't think they should be in women's prisons.
Yeah, exactly. Once you said that, everyone was like, what? Even like the most liberal people over there. That hasn't even become a concept yet over there. That's bizarre.
There's definitely an aspect to living in the end of history, as it were, where actually everyone's doing or was doing relatively well. We had lots of money. We have peace, primarily. And like you say, it makes you introspective.
You've been described by James Dellingpole as a leftist libertarian whose shtick is to question the received wisdoms of our time. Is there a way to...
What?
Libertarian who's...
Primarily. And like you say, it makes you introspective.
You've been described by James Dellingpole as a leftist libertarian.
What?
Whose shtick is to question the received wisdoms of our time. Is there a way to convey to an audience what it is to question received wisdom without sounding red-pilled, peaked, woke?
I don't think I'm a leftist libertarian.
Yeah, I think it was a point I found on Wikipedia about lots of different people have called you different things across the spectrum.
Yeah, I have been called a lot of different things. I just call myself a traditionalist at this point. It's probably the furthest right you can go.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because liberalism was founded in opposition to traditionalism. But I think that liberalism doesn't have a monopoly on the things that it claims. And especially in the English tradition.
It depends on what you mean by right. So, actually Evola kind of brought this up, that the idea of the right is a very weird kind of watery concept, more so even than left, because right has historically meant sticking up for the status quo and the tradition, but that's always a moving goalpost. And so right now we got people calling themselves paleocons, who are like, we're the real traditionalists, but they're not actually supporting what is traditionally the status quo. They're supporting something completely different that is a very socially regressive ideology, but it's not necessarily tradition. Oh, is 1968 on the Infernal Church? Is that what you're talking about?
You can find all of these things. I mean, in fact, liberalism takes them from the English tradition. And so I'm just a traditional Englishman. And so I believe in all the normal things.
I would not say that Sargon is as far right as you can get. Like, not under any circumstances. He's definitely, I would consider him far right adjacent for sure, but like he defends the British Empire. That's pretty far right. But I wouldn't say that being far right means that you're extremely status quo traditionalist. I think it's a different idea that's more like the synthesis of tradition and radicalism. So the synthesis of the left-wing spirit and the right-wing sentiment. And that's really kind of what the National Socialist movement was, and the fascist movement. That is what I would consider far right. But it's open for interpretation, I guess.
Traditional English people believe. But sorry, what was the question?
But it's interesting what you're saying, because I think so many people I speak to about very similar things have been
Without tradition, we would know nothing, but with tradition, we have also lost a great deal of our possible knowledge. And that's from J. Robert Oppenheimer.
Called right wing as an insult and as a slur, and I can understand why one might want to sort of take ownership of that. Like, well, it's just, you know, it's no different to being left wing except the other thing.
Well, isn't that interesting? How the prejudice is to, oh, you're right wing, as if that's an insult. It's like, well, what does that mean?
Well, people associate it with Hitler because we learn more about Hitler than we do about.
But Hitler was a socialist.
Just regular garden variety.
I'm not even joking. He self-identified as a socialist. He ran a command economy. He had all sorts of abstract categoricals, and exactly the same way the socialists do now.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Hold on. We got to play this back again. I wasn't paying attention.
I was like, well, what does that mean?
Well, people associate it with Hitler because we learn more about Hitler than we do about.
But Hitler was a socialist.
Oh God.
Yeah. I'm not even joking. He self-identified as a socialist. He ran a command economy. He had all sorts of abstract categoricals, and exactly the same way the socialists do now. He wasn't.
What does that mean? Abstract categoricals? What is he even talking about? This reminds me of that part in the Joe Rogan Experience with Adam Conover, where he's like talking about the way the ball moves around. Do you guys remember that? Like, what are you talking about, the way the ball moves around?
A traditionalist. A traditionalist is someone who doesn't think that they have a mandate for total control over society.
What is that even, like, what tradition are you talking about? Like, there's different ways to be a traditionalist. There's different meanings of tradition. It's not this monolithic thing. This is a very weird line of argumentation. Especially when Hitler was so explicitly against socialism in so much of his rhetoric. Yeah, he called himself a socialist, but there's a nuance to that you're not capturing when you just say, but Hitler was a socialist. He ran a command economy and he had abstract categories. What the hell is he talking about?
Right, every liberal does, as you saw with the John Rawls thing. Obviously, Hitler being the archetype of totalitarian does. Obviously, the communists do, being, you know, the 20th century being more than enough for evidence for that. But I don't think I have a mandate over all of society. Right? I actually think that your business is your business, my business is my business, and actually, I would call myself a virtue ethicist, as in it's how we get from A to B that really matters. I mean, obviously, it could be that you're trying to do something evil, but if you're just being a normal person and you work hard, you get paid, and you buy a house, then there's virtue in that, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that, in fact, means that I don't get to take that away from you because you did something virtuous. In fact, what authority am I assuming to say that I should take that away from you? Like, again, it brings up all sorts of questions of who do you think you are? You know, the liberal and the communist who wants to reformat society. Like, who exactly do you think you are, and where do you think you get this authority from?
Is there any value in trying to help people who were born into less fortunate positions? And I get what you were saying before, which is like, well, yes, but whenever it's tried, the gap's even bigger, though, isn't it?
There are loads of ways of helping people. Stealing from other people just isn't one of them. Right?
But
you mean taxing other people? You mean taxing people to give money to the government to fund programs like the dole? That's what you mean. I'd like to hear Sargon's systemic methods for approaching the poverty situation. I'd like to hear Sargon's proposals for how we solve the situation of poverty without stealing from people. Because So far, he hasn't offered any. All he can do is criticize. But I haven't seen him actually give any kind of alternatives.
But people aren't going to just do it off their own volition, not in high enough numbers.
Charity used to be a massive thing in this country. Like the Victorians had hundreds of different charities. The NHS began as a charity. Like charity used to be one of the core tenets.
Charity, just charity. That's his only solution to the problem. I mean, hey, I support it. Not a bad idea. But I'm not convinced that you're going to really solve the systemic issue of poverty just by convincing a bunch of wealthy people to give money out of the kindness of their own hearts. Then again, I don't think that the dole is going to fix it either. I don't think that welfare is going to fix it. It might help, and charity might help. But I think solutions like revolution by reason, systemic solutions that seek to increase purchasing power at the bottom in however they do are probably where we need to look in the future if we really want to tackle this issue in a holistic way instead of just constantly applying band-aids to it.
Of British life, and used to have monuments to people who would spend huge amounts of money. I mean, for example, there's an interesting example in modern day. In San Francisco, there is the Zuckerberg Hospital. How do you even got that name? Because it got an endowment from Mark Zuckerberg to build a hospital.
Do you see that Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where they donate to wings of hospitals?
I haven't seen that.
Larry David and Ted Danson, the actor from Cheers.
Yeah.
And Larry's all happy with himself because he donated a wing and it's called the Larry David wing. And then Ted Danson's one's called just Anonymous Donor, but everyone knows
it's called How to Help the Impoverished. So at some point, I hope Sargon's going to get to the point.
Ted Danson.
And say more than just charity. Because so far, I mean, charity ain't cutting it. So, like, what? Either we need to somehow make charity work better, or come up with something else.
And Larry's Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, on another. And this has been just generally ascribed as the sort of collapse of civil society. When you've got a civil society where people feel that they have an obligation to get involved, then, well, things can be done without civil servants.
So, okay, then what is... And we don't have enough time for a brief.
Yeah.
You're in charge now.
Oh God.
I imagine. Yep, I'm putting you in charge. I have that power, by the way, by virtue of my father working hard. And so, what are some of the main big steps? Okay, because you don't want people being poor and being born in difficulties and having difficulties. So, what would you do?
Well, I mean, being poor and having difficulties. Being poor is a relative question, right? So, I mean, our poor have iPhones. And they eat McDonald's. So, I mean, there are going to be kids in Africa who are in cobalt mines at the moment who say, you're not poor. Right? Yeah. So, poverty is a relative phenomenon that is about comparison to the people around you. So, I'm not going to try and eradicate poverty.
I mean, kind of, but there's a certain point where, like, if we're talking about the difference, like, let's say that everybody is living at a 70 grand level, and then the impoverished people are living at a 30 grand level. Like, I don't think, I guess it depends on how much a grand buys in an economy. But, I think there's a level where you can say we've eliminated poverty. I don't think it's always going to be just comparative. It is comparative to a degree. But even the more well-off people in the really poor countries, I would still consider pretty impoverished. I think there is kind of an absolute we can attach to that.
Because even if everyone's standard of living is that they're driving around in Jaguars, those people who don't have the flying cars will say, well, look how poor I am. I've only got a Jag, right?
Sure.
So that it's not about eradicating poverty. It's about making sure that everyone has a good opportunity and is not unfairly dealt with. So, for example, I think, and I'm not a free market guy either. Mm-hmm. I'm in favour of property ownership. I mean, we're at the point now where the free market is actively inhibiting people's ability to buy property. So, I mean, part of the free market, I mean, if you look at the EU's, like the EU being like the ultimate neoliberal project, really, their 4 demands of the movement of goods, capital, labour, and something else. I can't remember, wealth probably. I can't remember what they're for. But the point is, if you've got a totally free market, then money can move to a certain place, but also labour can move to a certain place. And that means if you have a rich country, or what was a rich country, like Britain, and then that labour market is open to poor countries, then you get a distinctly unfair occurrence happening, which is the mass movement of people to that rich country, and that has knock-on effects. That's the reason rent's so high. You can't buy a house because it turns out that people from elsewhere are people, and they need to live somewhere, and they want to get jobs, and this means that the cost of housing goes up massively, but also wages are depressed because of the job market becomes a buyer's market rather than a seller's market. So if you're running a business, you've got lots of different people to choose from. You can actually start undercutting until you get to a person who is prepared to work for a much lower wage than someone else. If you had a more narrow pool of recruits, applicants, then you would have to be more competitive with what you're offering. And then, of course, if you've got a narrow pool of applicants, that means you've got fewer people. So someone who's renting a house can't say, right, I'm going to rent it out for £2,000 a month. It's going to be only £1,000 a month. So it changes the dynamic of who benefits from these things. And so I would probably stop immigration at this point. Yes. Oof. Yeah. And it's the fact that sounds extreme really tells us a lot about the position we've come to, right? Because it's totally unusual to have immigration. Most countries don't have immigration.
Is that right?
Yeah, because nobody wants to go there, right? I mean, like, how many immigrants do you think Uganda takes every year?
Well,
I would say most countries have immigration to some degree or another. Just they don't have massive waves of immigration like the United Kingdom. I don't even. I think that he's making a certain amount of sense here. I mean, just talking about supply and demand. But is stopping immigration going to fix poverty? I mean, he said he's not even in favor of eliminating poverty, but is it going to increase purchasing power at the bottom? Maybe. But I find it interesting that that's his only solution other than charity so far. Maybe he'll bring up something else. It doesn't seem like that would be enough to address the fundamental issue with just income fairness. But I don't really know for sure.
I know in Argentina loads of Bolivians are going in, Venezuelans are all going in there, but I guess Argentina...
Okay, well, how many people are immigrating to Bolivia?
Maybe Paraguayans. I really don't know.
But the point is, most countries aren't actually a lodestone for mass immigration, right? It's actually not normal to get millions of people every year, 1.4 million this year, 1.3 million last year, 1.2 million before Conservative government. It's actually not normal to have this kind of mass movement of people. And it's in unusual cases like the United States or Britain or Europe where this happens. Most countries are actually kind of static when it comes to their population because usually there's no incentive to go there, right? But we're in this unusual position where we've had this for 25 years. And so now a quarter of England and Wales are foreign born. And it's like, right, okay, this was not how things should have gone. The infrastructure we're using was built in the 70s and the 80s, when the population of the entire country was something like 55 million, 56 million, and the population now is probably over 70 million. Although the census says 69 million, there are going to be lots of people who aren't counted.
Census just has a sense of humour, dirty one.
Yeah. And so this is why everything is failing, right? Everything costs a fortune. The NHS will never not be funded. Like the constant refrain with the NHS is, oh, the Tories are not, cutting the funding of the NHS. It's like, no, you can look at the NHS funding. It's this constant upward graph. The problem is, when you bring in millions of people every year, a million, well, the burden on the free at point of service health service just keeps going up. And so there's no end to this. And then you go, okay, why aren't the house prices going down? There's got to be a collapse in the housing market. No, because there's constant demand. You're bringing in more and more people. So there's never a point at which that can go down, because these people need to live in houses.
Is that ever counterbalanced by people adding to the wealth of the country? Or are immigrants always going to be a net loss because they're coming from a place of being disadvantaged? And so they always have to start at the bottom? Because obviously some immigrants can be very helpful for an economy if they fill the sort of roles that are needed by the economy, and they add to the wealth of the country. But it's a big debate, I guess, between left and right on whether it's a net benefit or a net detriment, or if it's kind of complicated where the massive waves of immigration can be a net detriment, but if they trickle in, it can be a positive. John Mearsheimer would disagree. I don't know who that is. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go in less than an hour because I have to take a night class. I just remembered that. That's why I stumbled there for a second. I got distracted by that thought. That's irritating because I feel like I should stream longer. I want to stream longer, but because we're only on this video. I didn't even get to review any of the videos that Claudia sent me. God, that's annoying. Because I can't come back streaming after the class. And tomorrow I'm going to be busy. Man. Okay. Well, I'll probably want to do a part 2 of this stream at some point, but I might not be able to do it until next week. That's ugh. That sucks. I really wish I didn't have that night class to go to tonight. That's a drag.
Obviously. And then the job market, why aren't people...
So we're on Kelly Osbourne. Let's go past that. Heretic. Carl admires. All right, why is this the most replayed part of the video? This has a huge amount of replays. I have to see what's going on here.
Robinson, which is never a popular thing to say in polite company, but...
What did he say?
I'm not going to say not pal.
No, is he going to say Tommy
Fucking hell.
The Heretic?
It would be funny, but I'm not going to do it. Actually, I quite admire Tommy Robinson.
Man, yep. He said Tommy Robinson. That's a gasp moment. British National Party, I think. God, he is far right. Why is he so far right? Claudia says Thursday. No, I can't stream today after class. It's gonna be too late. I'm gonna be too loud, and I live with my grandfather, whose bedroom is connected by a vent directly to my room, and so he's gonna be hearing a lot of noise when he's trying to sleep. So I can't do it tonight, unfortunately. But Thursday I might be able to do it. The thing is, but I wanted to go to my friend's house on Thursday because I haven't seen him in a while, and I want to plan a road trip with him. So I have something I actually need to do on Thursday, but I might be able to delay it so that I can do that stream on Thursday. I don't know. But let's see what he has to say about Tommy Robinson.
Which is never a popular thing to say in polite company, but I think he has been unfairly maligned because he was raising the alarm bells of a real problem that was really happening, and he was told it wasn't happening, and it has come to the point now where it's undeniable, and he isn't what people said he was. He genuinely isn't, as far as I can tell. I have yet to see something of his. No one ever presents any statements of his. They never say, oh, Tommy Robinson said this evil thing. It's like, okay, what did he say? They don't say that. They say, he is a racist. He is a bad person. He is this. He is that. It's like, okay, but what has he actually done? And what his crime is
I feel like he has said, like, racist things before. Or at least things that are adjacent to racism. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't remember anything specifically that he said.
To represent working class English interests. That's his crime. And of course, if we go back to well, it's about representation, it's about recognition. Well, he represents a majority who are being unfairly oppressed, actually, against a minority who are being unfairly privileged. And that's why he's treated the way he is. And also there are class issues there as well, of course, because he's got a working class accent, and the people he talks to get their coffee in Pret, and they hate him for it.
It's an interesting one, Tommy Robinson, because, you know, for this podcast, you're thinking, okay, who shall I have on? And you want controversial people.
Yeah.
But then Tommy Robinson is probably him and Katie Hopkins. I know non-Brits might not know who either of those are. Those are two where you go, oh, is that going to stop future guests coming on? And then you do think, what are the things that Tommy Robinson has said? Now, Katie Hopkins, there is actually...
Yeah, exactly. Katie Hopkins, you can find statements that...
some things.
Yeah. But even then, I don't think that should be a barrier to talking to these people, because it's not the sum total of their personality. But with Tommy Robinson, I just don't know what it is he's supposed to have said.
It's a bit of a J.K. Rowling in that sense, isn't it? I don't know what... You keep asking people, what is it J.K. said? I don't know. Yeah, I'd need to look into it a lot and then I really pour through it and go, okay, that was what I guess what I'd be looking for then is that hardware versus software thing. Has he said things that have had a go at people for their hardware, who they are? If we're talking about Muslims, because they are Arabs who do this and that.
Well, that's the thing. I've never seen him say anything. I've only ever seen him talk about Islam as a doctrine and philosophy and a belief system, which theoretically in liberal Britain we.
Okay, so I'm kind of interested in this Tommy Robinson thing, because I could have sworn I saw a video a guy made a long time ago about Tommy Robinson, and it was related to Dave Rubin, because Tommy Robinson went on the Rubin Report. Let's see, Tommy Robinson, Dave Rubin... Let me see if I can find... It was like some guy criticizing Dave Rubin for having Robinson on his podcast, and Robinson's sort of rhetoric on that podcast not lining up with... not lining up with the stuff that he said outside of the podcast. I'm trying to find it. I don't know if I can find it. Yeah, I'm never gonna find it. It was something I saw a long time ago. It's really the only exposure I have to Tommy Robinson was from that video. And so I had a certain impression of him. Maybe it wasn't the correct impression. But, yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to get ready soon. I'm going to have to get out the door in 30 minutes. And so I can stick around here for a little while longer, maybe, but I'm going to have to get ready. I don't know if there's really much more to say. The chat's kind of quiet right now. So I might just call it for the night right now. It's kind of, yeah, it's unfortunate that I had to end it so early because I had way more that I wanted to cover. But I guess that gives you a good taste of some culture war stuff. We covered a lot of interesting material. Sargon is an interesting person. I definitely like him. I think that he has some major blind spots, and I think that in some ways he's an idiot. But I do still like a lot of what he says. I just wish that he would be more critical of the right. I think that's probably the biggest problem with him, is that he has this extreme selective judgment bias. But I would like to maybe someday, one of these times in the future, have a conversation with him, because I've always thought he was interesting. But yeah, I guess that's it for today. That's the end of the stream. I'll stream again soon. I want to get back to you guys soon, and I also have a video coming out this week. Still needs to be exported. I'm having trouble with the export on it, but it's all done. So I'll get it up as soon as I can. But yeah, those really long videos can sometimes be difficult to export. I might have to break it up into smaller sections again and export, even though I already did that. I had 8 sections, but then I added a soundtrack underneath it. Maybe that made it more complicated, so I might have to break it up again and export it that way. But I'll get it up as soon as I can. So